I just need to bring them out there.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting for Monday, May 8th, 2017. My name is Mark Farrell. I will be chairing this committee. I am joined by our committee vice chair, Supervisor Aaron Peskin, as well as our committee member, Supervisor Katie Tang. I want to thank Maya Hernandez and Jim Smith from SSG TV for covering this meeting, as well as John Carroll, the clerk of our committee. Mr. Clerk, do we have any announcements?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Please make sure to silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the May 16th Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, Mr. Clerk, would you call item number 1, please?
Agenda item number 1 is an ordinance amending ordinance number 1061 entitled Regulating the Width of Sidewalks to narrow the sidewalk width along a portion of Mission Street from 21 feet to 15 feet and making appropriate findings. Okay,
thank you very much. So, colleagues, I'm going to entertain a motion after public comment to continue this item until May 15th, so a week from today. And we'll be voting on it today. So before I do that, though, we'd like to open up to public comment. Anybody wish to comment on item number 1? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. Colleagues, could I get a motion to continue this item for 1 week?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Tang. We can take that without objection. Mr. Clerk, would you call item number 2?
Agenda item number 2 is an ordinance amending the planning code and the 100% affordable housing bonus program to add the Home SF program, the analyzed state density bonus program, and the individually requested state density bonus program, establishing procedures, adding a fee for applications, and making appropriate findings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. So this item was sponsored by Supervisor Katie Tang, so I will turn it over to her.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you everyone who have turned out for this hearing on this item, whether you are in support or have objections to it. We're all interested in hearing your thoughts today. So the legislation before you is really a multi-year effort that we began with the planning department staff to really try to solve for how it is that we can address our housing affordability issues here in San Francisco, how to preserve our middle-income families here, and get more people into affordable housing in general. As you'll see later on in our presentation from our planning staff, our middle-income families and households are the most rapidly declining population here in San Francisco. And if we don't do something about it, then I think that San Francisco will not be the unique, amazing, diverse place that it is. And so we had worked for many years very hard to figure out how it is that we could come up with an affordable housing program to solve for all of those needs, making our buildings more family friendly, serving workforce households, serving middle income families. And, you know, I know that there's been a lot of dialogue, not particularly around Home SF, but around other housing programs that, you know, we shouldn't be providing housing for people who have higher incomes. Well, the reality is that, you know, based on even our 2017 numbers in terms of the area median income, even teachers who start out with a salary around $56,000 are now in the category of around 70% of the area median income. But traditionally, our city has built housing for those who earn 55% of the area median income or below. And that is where the vast majority of our city's housing production is, because that is where our city can access federal tax credits. But to me, that is not okay. We really need to serve more families of a variety of income levels. And so that is what Home SF does. And so our planning staff, Paolo Ikezoe, will come up later to go over the basic details of the program, and then I will have some amendments to make as well today. But I think that there are many things that are really unique about Home SF that really provide a lot more protections for small businesses, for example, than any other law in the books or state density bonus law. And for just 1 minute, I do want to say that in the context of the state density bonus law, which, yes, has been in existence since 1979, really we are trying to offer something that is much more attractive than the state density bonus law, and that reflects what we believe in here in San Francisco, such as that we do not want development to displace existing residential units. So with that said, I think why don't we dive into the planning department's presentation, and then of course I'm sure we'll have a very robust discussion here. So Paolo?
Good afternoon, supervisors. Thank you for inviting me to speak this afternoon. My name is Paolo Ikezoe. I'm with the planning department staff, and I've been working on this program from the very beginning in 2015. So this presentation will cover goals, process, and a description of Home SF and how it serves a critical housing need for San Franciscans at a variety of income levels. So if I could get the overhead. So first, the goals of Home SF. The program began as a local response to the state density bonus law. We wanted to create a program that went further and was tailored to San Francisco's housing needs and specific local context. Locally, our driving goal was to produce more affordable housing. The program was the first to seek inclusionary housing that would be affordable to middle-income households and working families. So those were the goals from the beginning, and now I'll discuss the process. Home SF underwent extensive community outreach. We held public meetings in each supervisor district. The Planning Commission conducted 4 hearings, and Supervisor Tang and staff delivered presentations at various other stakeholder groups and city commissions. As an example, just last month, the Small Business Commission voted to endorse the program. The last time this legislation was here before you, it was paired with the 100% Affordable Housing Bonus Program. That program was moved forward by this committee to the full board, where it passed unanimously. That program enabled Mo and affordable housing developers to add over 200 units to affordable housing projects that it already had in the pipeline. The legislation before you today, Home SF, is an optional program that requires 30% affordable on-site units, including homes affordable to moderate and middle-income households. Home SF delivers these benefits while setting clear parameters reflecting our local preferences and priorities. So why Home SF, and how does it meet the housing needs of San Franciscans? There are 3 main reasons why it's important. It more than triples the amount of affordable housing we could produce over the next 20 years. It does so while respecting neighborhood context, guaranteeing no residential displacement, and providing support for small businesses. And it addresses a currently unmet need, housing affordable to middle-income working families. Let's look at who lives in San Francisco today, compared to 1990 and 2000. You can see we've added many high-income households, and the city has retained a relatively stable number of very low-income households, shown here in orange. Unfortunately, we've seen a steady decline in the number of low and moderate-income households living in San Francisco. This chart compares our city's housing production in each income category with the estimated need. Housing production in each income category is in dark gray. Also shown in light gray is where we're failing to meet the city's estimated housing need. Highlighted in red is where we've done the poorest in building housing to meet the need. While we've got need in all 3 of the lowest income categories, we're building very few units for the low and moderate income groups. These are the hardest units to produce because market rents and sales prices in San Francisco are so high, and public dollars can only generally be used to subsidize units priced at 60% of AMI or less. This chart shows in more detail how the existing housing programs are serving various income groups. 82% of the 29,000 or so existing BMR units serve households making less than 60% of AMI. The programs serving households making more than that are the Inclusionary Ownership Program and units produced by the former redevelopment agency. There are almost no public resources devoted to households making over 120% of area median income. It definitely makes sense for most of our public dollars to serve the lowest income households. However, as the cost of housing in San Francisco continues to rise, we're finding that households making more than 60% of AMI are increasingly struggling to find affordable homes. Our on-site inclusionary program and Home SF are our best tools to address this least served need. I will note that Home SF creates opportunities for moderate and middle income families without taking away any resources from the lowest income households. With or without this program, the vast majority of San Francisco's public resources will go towards housing our lowest income families. Home SF will create units affordable to a wide range of people. To put some context behind AMIs, here are some typical jobs and salaries and the AMI levels that they represent. If we want public school teachers and EMS workers to be able to afford to live in San Francisco, then we must work to create housing that they can afford. I always say that Home SF is a program where the city gives a little bit in order to get a lot more back. So what are we giving and what are we getting back in return? Home SF offers developers increased density and 2 additional stories of height. In return, here's what we get. A developer must provide 30% of all units in the building as on-site affordable units. Units would be provided across 3 tranches of affordability, with 10% in each tranche. 40% of the units in the building must be 2 bedrooms or larger. The project cannot demolish any existing residential uses on a parcel, and a developer must provide early notification to any small businesses that might be displaced. No other program in San Francisco has all of these requirements. To ensure developers build units that serve working families, Home SF includes a number of family-friendly features. All Home SF projects require a minimum of 40% 2 bedrooms, with an additional incentive to build 3-bedroom units. Project sponsors are encouraged to include family-friendly amenities like bathtubs in larger units and open spaces suitable for children. But most importantly, Home SF will create homes in neighborhoods where families can thrive, close to shops and services, and existing infrastructure like transit, parks, and schools. Generally, Home SF applies in zoning districts that allow residential uses and control density by a lot area ratio. Home SF is not available in RH1 or RH2 districts, in areas that were rezoned as part of our recent area plans, or in PDR districts. Even if a parcel is in an eligible zoning district, the program includes a number of limiting criteria that could potentially make it ineligible. The biggest limit is on demolition of existing residential uses. If a parcel contains a single residential unit, it is not eligible for Home SF. If a parcel contains a known historic resource, it is also ineligible. What that generally leaves, and where this program is really targeted at, are soft sites like the one pictured here. We looked back at housing projects that have been completed in the past decade and found that they overwhelmingly took place on sites that looked like this. We took a citywide look at these soft sites in the program area and explored what Home SF could produce over the next 20 years. Home SF can dramatically increase the number of affordable units built. If each of the soft sites in the program area were developed to current zoning, they would yield 6,400 units. If every single one of those projects provided on-site inclusionary housing, we would get 1,600 affordable units under current zoning. However, if those same sites used Home SF, we would more than double the amount of housing produced to 16,000 units and more than triple the number of on-site affordable homes to 5,000. This program's focus is clearly on affordable housing. And while housing workers does help small businesses retain employees, Supervisor Tang heard many concerns about small business. In response, we've been working over the past year with OEWD and the Office of Small Business to figure out how to ensure this program does everything it possibly can to support small businesses that might be displaced by a development project. One of the biggest concerns we heard was that small businesses facing displacement need a lot of time to plan for relocation. In response, Home SF now requires a project sponsor to provide any commercial tenant at least 18 months' notice. The sponsor will also notify OEWD staff and provide the tenant with OEWD's guide to small business retention and relocation support. The project sponsor will provide detailed information about the existing commercial tenant, including whether it's a legacy business, to the Planning Commission. The sponsor will then work with the assigned planner and OEWD to make specific conditional use findings surrounding small business. When the project goes to Planning Commission for approval, the Commission will have the opportunity to comment on the impact to that small business and any relocation efforts that have taken place. This is a diagram of the process a Home SF project sponsor might go through if developing a property with an existing commercial tenant. Everything circled on this slide in orange is process that Home SF adds in support of small businesses. Note that none of these are required of any existing project in San Francisco. So to review, there are many benefits of this program over either the state density bonus and over just the standard local inclusionary requirement. It offers an attractive alternative to the state density bonus law and allows us to achieve local priorities, including the ability to control the physical form of new buildings. It delivers much-needed affordable housing in neighborhoods throughout San Francisco, and it's the city's first program to create homes affordable to moderate and middle-income working families who are struggling to stay in the city. With that, I thank you for your time and attention and look forward to answering any questions you may have about the program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ikezoe, for the great and thorough presentation. I know that there are a lot of speakers here, so I will reserve a lot of my comments for afterwards, but colleagues, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have up front.
Supervisor Peskin.
Through the chair, I'm happy to have public comment because I know that there are many people waiting, and then maybe we can discuss it amongst the members of this panel.
All right, thank you very much. So I have a number of speaker cards that I'm going to call, but also if you have children or you have other needs and you need to go first, please do line up by the curtains over there. Michelle Parker, Mac Allen, Tony Rodriguez, Paul Slade, and Ben Becker. Please come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Parker. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you today. I am a single working parent of 3 public school children in San Francisco. I have lived here for about 19 years and have been very active in our public schools. I'm also president and co-founder of the San Francisco Parent PAC, and snuck away from work for a few minutes to be able to come and share with you my perspective on this legislation. This legislation is important because San Francisco has left the middle class behind. Many people who work in nonprofit, like me, have moved to other parts of the Bay Area and commute to San Francisco, or they've left altogether because they couldn't afford to live here anymore. I support Home SF because I want San Francisco to have a thriving middle class. I'm a mom. My kids have had to say goodbye to many friends because we don't have enough affordable, family-friendly homes in San Francisco. I have a great landlord. He also told me when I moved in that they almost moved into my flat before they decided to rent it out. If he decides he wants to move into my flat, I'll have to find somewhere else, and I can't afford another place my size with the going rates of rent. I would have to leave the city. I support Home SF because I want families to be able to live here. My kids go to public schools, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for their teachers to be able to live here without working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. I support Home SF because I want teachers to be able to live in the communities they teach. I live in the outer Richmond, and there are some walkable parts of my neighborhood, but some businesses don't make it because there aren't enough people living in the area. Prioritizing more housing along transit and commercial corridors means we'll have great neighborhoods all over the city. I support Home SF because I want walkable, vibrant communities. If you support these things also, please vote yes on Home SF.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Mac Allen. I live in the Dog Patch. I believe in a future of abundant housing in San Francisco where a person can come to share in the opportunity and community of this place without winning a lottery of one kind or another. I believe that we are a city that knows how to finally get to work building the necessary housing that will provide an opportunity not only for those already here, but also for the people who are hoping to come here and be a part of this great city. Because I have 2 young children who are here with me today, I have to believe that this city will recognize that its children do not have the option of staying here as adults. If this city insists on resisting changes in the density of its neighborhoods and preserving cheap dwellings for cars instead of prioritizing building new housing, there is no possibility for my children to stay here when they are grown. If our city cannot welcome young people from outside the city, it cannot keep its own either. If our city chooses not to allow denser development, it is choosing to continue the situation which exists today, where the only people able to come here are those of extraordinary wealth. Without denser developments, the immigrants and the laborers and the teachers and the students who could pursue extraordinary opportunities this city is blessed with will have to look elsewhere for their homes. The crisis of affordability is a crisis of chronic shortage of housing production. I am here to urge the adoption of Home SF because it is a necessary part of a future I am working to make real, a future for San Francisco that welcomes new people of all kinds as an asset to the community once more. I am tired of hearing people say that new neighbors are a detriment to the community, that San Franciscans will not consent to share what they already have with others. I am tired of hearing that allowing denser neighborhoods is a giveaway to developers, when in reality, dense neighborhoods are the only chance our city has for a future of abundant housing where a person with modest income can find a home in the marketplace of housing. The city knows how. It must only choose to do the work and build its own future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Sarah Montoya. I have a family of 5. We have a toddler and twin boys, and we're currently living in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Inner Sunset. My husband's a teacher, and I have recently decided to stay home because we can't actually afford childcare for 3 kids right now, and so that's a different issue altogether. But back to the housing issue, we love San Francisco, and we have started looking for housing and simply can't afford anything. Even if I continued to work, we wouldn't be able to afford it, and because all of my income would go to childcare. And then if I do work, it looks like we might not qualify for some of the options, even though, again, my income wouldn't actually be going towards housing. So I really appreciate these efforts because I think that they would open a door for us to stay here. And my husband's a native San Francisco. I've been native San Franciscan, and I've been living here 10 years, and I absolutely love it here, and I want my kids to enjoy everything that San Francisco has to offer.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call up a couple more speakers: Jordan Bickett, Sam Moss, Trevor Martin, Lisa Aubrey, Jennifer Fiber.
My name is Paul Slade. I'm a 3rd-generation San Franciscan, and I live in Richmond. I'm also a retired Muni operator, and I was at the union offices today, Transport Workers 250A, and I told them about this meeting, and they said, please mention the fact that many Muni operators who were born in the city would love to stay here and raise their families, but indeed they cannot do it. They have long commutes after 12-hour days, nurses, teachers, the people we need in our community. And if indeed we're going to have a equitable city and a diverse city, I think we should have economic diversity in housing. So I support Home SF, and I support Supervisors Safaid and Lennon Breed's position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Becker. I'm an elected delegate in the local Democratic Party and the co-chair of the San Francisco Bernie-crats. I currently earn $15 an hour, and my wife is a kindergarten teacher. Please do not say that this housing is for us. We can't afford this housing, this quote-unquote affordable housing that this project would create. It's 1/3 is slated to go for people who are earning $83,000 or more. The other third is for somebody earning $100,000 or more. And the final third is for people earning $125,000. Teachers don't make anywhere near the very first lowest bracket for this housing program. It's really just, it's saddening to us, honestly, that this is where the debate about affordable housing has gone, and that somebody can actually say that this $80,000, $124,000 is affordable. It's not. And the prices that are being set for these homes, the lowest price for one of these apartments is $2,400 per month. According to the calculations, there are plenty of apartments that are available right now around the city for $2,400 per month. They aren't renting. And the reason that they're not renting is not because there aren't enough of them. The reason is that they are still not affordable to the average person, to the average teacher who does need housing. I'd like to ask for you to take another look at this program. I know it's been 2 years. I know it's a big ask. But please do something for the real teachers, the people who are really struggling in this city. We don't make $80,000, $90,000 a year.
Thank you very much. And I just want to clarify really quickly the different income brackets that we have for the rental below market rate program. It is offered at 55% of the area median income, 80% and 110% of the area median income. And for ownership, it would be 90% AMI, 120% AMI, and 140% AMI, even if for the ownership program going up to 140% of the area median income. A one-person household, for example, would not be making $120,000, but we can get into the AMI discussion later. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Tony Rodriguez, and I represent Local 483, Fire Sprinkler Union. I'm also a San Franciscan. I'm native, born and raised here. I came here to ask you to support Home SF. A few reasons I'd say why is my parents came here in 1948. My dad from Puerto Rico, my mom from Mexico. They met, married. Dad worked as a warehouseman, mom for Slage Lock. They raised 4 kids. They bought a home in '54 in Excelsior and lived the American dream. I grew up dreaming to be a teacher, getting married, having kids, and owning a home in San Francisco. And I did all that except for the teacher part. But I did become a construction worker for a union, made good wages that afforded me the ability to buy a home in the city that I worked in and was born in. Sadly, that dream does not exist for the middle class in San Francisco anymore. For construction workers, nurses, police, firefighters, teachers, hotel workers, janitors, and cooks, they can't afford to live and work in San Francisco anymore. Everything changes. I've been in San Francisco my whole life, and I've seen the changes. The Bay Area has attracted high-paid workers from Google, Apple, Facebook, Genentech, people who can afford $4,000 a month for rent, people who can afford homes that are $1.5 million or higher, prices that the middle class can't afford. People speak of gentrification. I looked it up last night, and it says raising property values, but often displacing lower-income families. I've seen it for the middle class that I grew up with, families that I went to school with, families that were in the city. They've had to leave San Francisco. I'm not against change, and I welcome the more affluent in San Francisco, but I'd hope that the middle class would be a positive part of the new San Francisco. Home San Francisco is the only legislation that I've seen that would have a guaranteed result in helping the middle class, and ask you to support Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Jordan Bickett. I'm a paycheck-to-paycheck millennial and a renter. But I'm here because I'm more concerned about what Edmund Burke called the little platoons of society, families, who, to extend his metaphor, are on the front lines of this shortage and this crisis. We have to get serious about using all of our levers, density, height. We can't just solve this problem, and I think just through introspection it's clear we can't just solve this problem by dialing the inclusionary percentage. We have to add more units at all prices. Let life take its course and let people just unleash the dynamic energy of our city by not constraining it. I have so much faith in the incredible people that I get to meet as a rideshare driver, and I'm moved to tears by their concerns and aspirations, and their parents, and they're working here in the city or over in Oakland, and they have to have the kids stay with the grandparent in Antioch, and we need to do this for them. We need to have Home SF to show that we're pointed in the right direction. We know what the answers will be. We can't solve every problem through policy, but we certainly need to density and pass Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to call up a couple other speakers, George Wooding, Frank Noto, Diego Hernandez, Victor Olivieri.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us speak here. My name is Trevor Martin. I am the treasurer for the San Francisco Bernie-Crats. I am a recent master's graduate at USF and a 12-year resident here in San Francisco. For the last 12 years, I have been working in the service industry. I am a bartender. I make minimum wage plus tips. And as such, my income has not changed much in the last 12 years other than when the minimum wage rises. My wife is a Colombian immigrant who recently got a job taking care of a family in Pacific Heights. Together, we might pull around $70K this year. And so, we will not reach 83, and we make too much to qualify as low income. And, I will tell you right now why San Francisco has left the middle class behind. It is because you keep redefining what it means to be middle class. $100,000, there was an article, low income, 6 figures is low income in the city. I don't know, what teachers, firefighters, tertiary sector like myself, we're getting priced out. This is not affordable housing. I commend SF for building, but we can't just build without thinking about who we are building for and who benefits from that construction. So I just ask that you take a long look at Home SF. This is not what we need. It needs.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Lisa Opry. I'm here with Affordable Divis. We respectfully request that you remove the specific references to Divisadero NCT and the Fillmore NCT from the Home SF legislation that is before you today. In 2015, Divisadero and Fillmore were rezoned as NCTs. All other NCTs are automatically excluded from this legislation because NCTs do not have density regulations. Density regulations are required to calculate the base density in this legislation. NCTs, by definition, do not meet the provisions under applicability for Home SF, which requires that a project must be located in a zoning district that establishes a maximum dwelling unit density through a ratio of number of units to lot area. Divisadero and Fillmore have already been given a density increase via the 2015 NCT designation, and we have pending legislation on these 2 corridors to increase affordable requirements in exchange for density. Finally, we have serious concerns about this legislation. First, we're disappointed that there has been virtually no outreach to our organization or neighborhood residents prior to this hearing. Second, it is premature to move this forward, given that the city has not yet finalized the citywide inclusionary rates. Third, we seek clarification whether the proposed BMR rate of 30% is on project with or without the proposed bonus. We have not had a chance to review the legislation with our members and may have additional comments once we complete our review. Please remove the references to the...
Thank you very much. And I neglected to speak to the amendments earlier, but that is certainly something that we will be making a motion on later. And also just to clarify, the 30% affordability rate applies to the entire project, including the density bonus. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Jennifer Fieber with the Tenants Union. Once again, this half-baked plan has been resurrected. There's been no planning staff report to prove the claims or to account for the threats of rising rents, job losses, and displacement in this legislation, but it's supposed to help the middle class. I find it pretty rich that the primary sponsor, Supervisor Tang's own district, is exempt. What is good for the mission is apparently not good for the sunset. Tenants of the BMR program have to prove their income each year and pay the maximum rent they can afford. But when it comes to developers' claims that projects won't pencil out, the city and the board just trusts them without making a requirement to show profits or prove anything. A development in the south of Market is completely different than an empty lot in the Mission, but Home SF suggests sweeping citywide changes that can be applied as if all situations are equal. There are developments out there that prove that you can demand 40% affordable and developers will still build. I support an amendment that the exemption for the north of Market area analysis should apply to all sensitive neighborhoods. The text all but admits that density bonuses might increase prices in neighborhoods like the Tenderloin, and urges an analysis to incentivize affordable housing production at levels deeper and wider ranges of AMI and larger unit sizes. These requirements should apply to all neighborhoods. I am also concerned about the effects on small businesses and their workers who will be displaced for the sake of condos. Again, there's been no study of the threat for low-wage workers, and a plan to protect our favorite neighborhood business is pretty much non-existent in this legislation. This plan needs to go back to the drawing board once again. Please don't try to sneak this through and claim it's a victory for affordable housing when affordable housing advocates object and nothing in it has to be proven.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call up a couple more speakers. Gail Baugh, Valerie Nietzsche, Tim Colin, Steve Boyle, Sarah Rogers, and Paul Weber.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Sam Moss. I'm the Executive Director of Mission Housing Development Corporation. I'm here personally to speak today in favor of Home SF. I think one thing that doesn't get brought up enough is how about a third of the city is expected to build all of the housing on it. And, this thing called redlining created basically the west side of our city. And it's time to attack that. Home SF is about urban infill. It's about building housing for everyone. And, I believe that that's what it will do. And I strongly urge you to pass it today. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Diego Hernandez, and I'm a member of Labor's Local 261. I got my brothers and sisters here with me today. Somehow I got the short end of the straw to come up and speak. So I'm going to relay the message that Local 261 supports Home SF. We need more housing for the middle class. We are the middle class. I was born and raised in the city, and I cannot afford to live here anymore. So, this will be great for me, great for my brothers and sisters, and we urge you to support Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is George Wooding. I'm the president of the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods. I am personally against Home SF as it upzones large parts of San Francisco. City zoning is currently based on floor area ratios called FARs that allow buildings to be based on square footage. Home SF is using a new form-based density zoning that does not correlate a building's square footage. In other words, Home SF only talks about the number of units being built. This is why the Planning Commission will continue to present how many units are being built, but it has no limit on minimum unit size. So you may find a 600 square foot two-bedroom seems to be the key word for middle class, units will now be considered middle class units. The law of unintended consequences. Increasingly smaller units will be built throughout the city, and they will lead to the increased migration of families with children, as they will be so small that children will no longer be able to live in these units. And if people want to live in dorm rooms their entire life, that's their prerogative. So I think San Francisco's younger population will live in smaller units. San Francisco's older population will live in smaller units. And San Francisco's middle class population will now live in smaller units. We at some point have to decide not only who we are, but how we want to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Sherman King. I'm an electronic engineer. I support Home SF because this legislation will build homes suitable for families. Buying a home is a dream of many families, so we work hard to buy a home. But currently, San Francisco housing is really in shortage and really drive up the house prices. And we hope that we have more houses being built, then we can afford house, we can have family more living here and fulfill their dreams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Valerie Nashe, and I'm a native San Franciscan that lives and works in San Francisco. I was raised in the diverse melting pot that made San Francisco so unique. The housing crisis has changed the city and its vibrant ecosystem in many ways. I've shared painful moments consoling friends and neighbors, teachers, and other public servants, such as myself, that can no longer afford the exorbitant rent here and had to move. As a recent law graduate working in public interest, I've experienced my own set of challenges. I've moved 6 times in the last 8 years, each move more painful than the last. And you can say I've had more than my fair share of roommate horror stories. Thus, unfortunately, right now I spend about 75% of my income on a modest 1-bedroom apartment in the Richmond district. I applaud Supervisor Katie Tang's Home SF initiative and hope that we can continue to expand affordable housing opportunities and support vertical housing growth, which will enable working-class families and natives such as myself to stay and continue to contribute to our communities. As of right now, the wait list for affordable housing opportunities under the new initiative takes years. So although we are taking a step in the right direction, I implore all of you to understand that the present housing crisis requires even a larger leap in the right direction. I also share empathy with those who are apprehensive at the idea of incessant construction in our neighborhoods. Urban growth and construction has its own share of growing pains. I experience this where I live in the Fulton Corridor, where there's near constant seismic retrofitting, underground pipe construction, and road repavement. I hope that as we move forward to a future for San Francisco where hardworking individuals and families are valued and provided an opportunity to live, work, and thrive here, we also consider all of these in making conscientious growth efforts. Thank all of you for listening and making the bold commitment to make San Francisco affordable for families and working class natives such as myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, supervisors. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Sarah Rogers, and I'm pleased to be here on behalf of District 9 Neighbors for Housing. We're residents of the Mission, Bernal Heights, the Portola, and St. Mary's Park who believe that the creation of more housing, affordable, market rate, and public is critical to the ensuring a vibrant and diverse community that can live, work, and raise families in our beloved city. Thank you, Supervisor Tang, for introducing this legislation. San Francisco's housing crisis is decades in the making, and there are no silver bullets. This legislation is a sensible and meaningful step in the right direction. It will result in much-needed new housing along transit corridors and near schools. Through its requirements for low and middle-income housing, as well as units for families, it will help people who are essential to the San Francisco we know and love. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi there, my name is Steve Boyle. I think there are 2 pretty compelling visual aids in this room for Home SF. Number 1, I think I see more children in here than I see on a typical walk around the city. And number 2, the amount of people here from varying points of the ideological spectrum who are here to give public comment because they're scared that in a couple of years they won't still be in this city to give public comment. I want to talk to you because I'm an artist. I run a small arts nonprofit. We work with a deliberately diverse cross-section of artists across race, the geography of the city, and the ideological spectrum and the economic spectrum. Everyone from hip-hop artists to taiko drummers to ballet folklorico dancers to folks who make less than minimum wage to folks in the middle class and aspiring to be in the middle class and with kids. And I would say that all of them are constantly in fear that they'll be displaced from the city. I'm worried about the arts community as a whole, something that has meant so much to the identity of San Francisco, and I'm worried about the people here, both in lower class and in the middle class in San Francisco, because it's an emergency situation for both. And I think the worst thing we can do now is to turn on each other. And the best thing we can do now is to aggressively push for solutions that will help both lower class folks in San Francisco looking to stay here and middle class folks in San Francisco to stay here. That's why I'm so enthusiastic about Home SF, which will create more middle-class housing without displacing current tenants. It's a lifeline for so many people in the artistic community. I would suggest for the artistic community as a whole, I want to thank you for your work on it and the work you've done to make sure to mitigate consequences to small businesses and to ensure that there's no displacement of current tenants, and I hope that you'll support Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Gail Baugh, and I'm president of the Hayes Valley Neighborhood Association. We believe and applaud you for increasing the amount of housing that's going to be available in the city. We've led the way with the Market Octavia plan. We've tried very hard to make it possible for having high-density amounts of housing. We do have some concerns, however, regarding we believe the way the legislation is written may not adequately protect the merchants who are in the way, especially those houses, that housing or buildings that have no residents above them. And often legacy businesses and businesses that have been here for quite a while that are neighborhood serving are at risk. In particular, the Hayes Goff Neighborhood Commercial Transit District, which is has a formula retail ban in place, could be targeted for development and merchants evicted from the spaces. We've already had examples of businesses that were neighborhood serving who were asked to leave and promised that they could come back, and later the development changed their minds. So in some cases, the consequences is that the neighborhood serving businesses are promised one thing, but something else has happened altogether. I have a couple of suggestions. One is to prohibit large retail spaces in excess of 2,400 square feet and even create fine-grained retail spaces between 800 and 1,000 square feet. Large commercial spaces on the ground floor invite formula retail tenants instead of local businesses. Protect legacy businesses, which it sounds like you're trying to do. And in the Western Addition, where we're undergoing significant change in housing, we see that there are going to be problems. There are examples along the Fillmore Commercials corridor that have already been developed that contrast how new housing development can retain neighborhood character or remove it. I really hope that you consider all of the things that I've discussed.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Tim Colon, and I've followed this for years and wholeheartedly support it. I think the first point I'd like to make is that this is backed by solid research. The Planning Department labored for years with excellent consultants, including David Baker, and they've done the city proud. This is based on solid urban planning. It's based on the idea of putting underutilized land into productive use, especially along transit corridors, by thoughtfully increasing height and density and using that value to increase housing affordability. And for the first time in the city's history, to allocate some of that to the middle class, something we've never done before. And I think it's worth pointing out that in presentations here at City Hall over the years, the Mayor's Office of Housing has said that of the subsidized housing that's been built, 92% of it has been for low-income folks. That's good, but it points to the complete lack of housing for the middle class and the middle income, which this does. The second thing is that Home SF, what it does is it finally offers the city a way to enact a local density bonus ordinance, and it's something that we should have done years ago. As we know, the state density bonus is in effect, and this is a more generous version of it with many more safeguards in it. The point is this: if this is not passed, the state density bonus is still a law, and developers can apply for that. That gives far less affordable housing and has far fewer safeguards in it. We've heard that, well, market rate housing shouldn't be allowed until the West Side takes on its fair share and building is allowed there. Here's the first time that we've got something sensible that's going to do that. And we can finally start building out in areas that are less dense where we should be building housing. Please pass this.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Burke. I'm a small business owner and a market rate renter in District 3. I'm speaking in support of the project. We've been underbuilding housing in California for decades. Since 2010 alone, we've had 2.3 million people move to California. We've only built 400,000 housing units. It's easy to see in those situations why prices keep rising. In San Francisco, over the past 2 decades, we've had 6% average rent increases year over year. That means that your real wages are lower because you're paying more in rent each year. In particular for me, I'm trying to save to buy a home, and that's harder every year when rent keeps increasing. Last year, we built 5,000 units, almost as many as Seattle builds every year, and rents finally decreased. Owner move-in evictions finally decreased as well. These are both benefits of building more housing, as that rents fall and more people can live here in our beautiful city. We should make it easy to build more units. I think it's pretty cynical that the Sierra Club opposes this motion. From an environmental perspective, there's nothing better than dense infill construction in San Francisco. We have a Mediterranean climate here, which means you don't need to run the AC or heating very often. San Francisco uses the least water of any county in the state on average. This bill also prioritizes housing near transit, which means it's efficient to get around. It would help add more housing on the west side, which has better air in general than the places where we're currently building housing. When we don't build in San Francisco, we build in Hercules, Brentwood, and Gilroy. Those areas had some of the highest growth in the Bay Area last year, about 5% housing growth every year. And that's not great for the environment and not great for commutes. If you imagine 4,000 people getting in their cars in Brentwood at 6:30 in the morning and watering their lawns in Brentwood instead of living in San Francisco, that's what happens when we don't build in San Francisco. We make people run a gauntlet to build housing here with CEQA and discretionary review and everything, and we should reward people who are willing to build here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Weber. I participated a couple of years ago in drafting a letter for the Coalition of San Francisco Neighborhoods, in which we had numerous comments regarding what was then the local AHBP. And I'm not going to repeat those again, but I do want to comment on just one item that's come up under Home San Francisco, which, if changed, can accelerate the rate of development for the program. Inasmuch as Home San Francisco requires 30% below market rates, whether or not the project is eligible for inclusionary units, and if it is eligible, can and must combine the inclusionary on-site units. It is clear that there's no need to not require now the ultimate maximum number of inclusionary units to be built on site, as required by both of the inclusionary ordinances that are going to be heard next week. The reason for the almost 15-year delay in reaching maximum was the ostensible wanting to mitigate against market volatility. Well, if a developer's come in and said, I'm going to put up inclusionary housing, that developer's already made up his mind about that. So if you want to improve the program and accelerate the rate of growth, then for goodness sakes, require inclusionary components of it to be ratcheted up, and the whole package should be at 30%. If that's where Home SF ends up, that's where the whole package should be. I've also made comments in the letter about how the marketing survey should be modified, and I think you'll be getting other comments on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I call the next speaker, a couple more cards. Brandon Harami, Norman DePover, Keith Friedman, Serena Kennerly, Patty Morse, Ken Trey, Catherine Howard, Joseph Smoot, and Deepa Varma. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Brian Hamlin, but I'm speaking on behalf of my friend Malig, since I've already been displaced from the city. My name is Malig, and I'm an immigrant to the U.S. and to San Francisco. While I am reminded of this every day, I found in the city a new home and a welcoming community. My two kids are born and raised in San Francisco. My oldest is a first grader in SFUSD, and the youngest is a preschooler. It was a difficult choice financially, especially with only one salary, but we made the decision to stay in the city where I work rather than commuting 3 hours every day or even moving to other states like many of our friends have done over the years. Because they are culturally and economically diverse, I believe that cities, not suburbs, are the best places to raise tolerant, open-minded, and spirited children. Unfortunately, because San Francisco is not building enough housing, it is becoming less diverse year after year. I have seen my neighborhood and other parts of the city become richer, whiter, and older, a new Monaco. I clearly do not want that. We live in a multifamily building by Ocean Beach in the Outer Sunset, a neighborhood that is plagued by empty lots, one-story commercial buildings, and single-family homes owned by empty nesters who park their 3 cars on the sidewalk. All of this while having 3 rapid transit corridors, Judah, Noriega, and Tarval streets, that are within walking distance of every single block in the neighborhood. If you hear people telling you that the west side of the city is the last working class and family-friendly neighborhood, I can tell you one thing, it is a myth. All homes are valued at more than $1 million and totally unaffordable to working class families. Families don't need a big backyard. We have Ocean Beach, Golden Gate Park, and the zoo when we need to go outside. We don't need a garage. I use my cargo bike for our 5-mile morning commute. from our place at Ocean Beach to preschool in the Sunset, to school in Haight-Ashbury, and finally to work in the Inner Sunset. When it's raining too much, we take Mooney. Home SF is exactly the kind of ambitious plan that will help millennial families like ours who are not earning enough to rent or buy at market rate, yet earn too much for subsidized housing. It will not only alleviate the need for more missing middle housing, but also provide actual family-friendly and transit-oriented, environmentally desirable options. I would like to thank our District 4 Supervisor, Katie Tang, for taking the lead on this much-needed legislation, which might be the only chance for us to see a future here in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Bob Tillman, and I am the developer of a 75-unit state density bonus project in the Mission. And my project has been in the pipeline for over 3 years. And I want to say that I strongly support this legislation because it would have been wonderful to have in place clear guidelines on how to apply the state density bonus law when I was trying to figure out the process over the course of the past 3.5 years. I also want to point out that you all have received a letter from my attorney regarding the proposed in lieu fee on state density bonus units. The letter basically indicates that that fee is likely illegal. I also want to say that that fee will undercut Home SF if it's implemented by removing a large part of the economic incentive of using it. And lastly, I'd like to say I think it's kind of unfair to change the rules on someone who's been in the pipeline for over 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Louis Dillon, Making San Francisco Great Again Coalition. The resounding response from the middle class here is if they had a summer home in San Francisco and a winter home in hell, they'd spend all their summers in their winter home. The figures purportedly supposed to be related to middle class and low income, those are developers' figures. Those are not figures that relate to the middle class that are making $3,000, maybe $4,000 a month. This doesn't provide a pathway for low-income, working-class families to own their home in San Francisco. It creates densely populated housing that families cannot sustain or live in for a long period of time. I would like you to send this legislation back to the committee and have an independent middle-class organization do the figures that are really here instead of giving us the lip service and it falling into one of 3 categories: lies, bad lies, and statistics from the planning department. These are obviously pay-to-play figures, and they've been bought and rubber-stamped by this quote-unquote city government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I'm a 10-year resident of District 11, the Excelsior. I live in a single-family home with roommates, and we believe in a San Francisco for everyone. We see Home SF as a step in the right direction. We support Home SF and Katie Tang making this issue a priority, but there does need to be a longer look at what is affordable and who it is affordable to. I think in the Excelsior, we have many empty storefronts. We want to see more building in the Excelsior. We want to see more housing, but we do need to be able to afford them. We appreciate the amendments for displacement and small businesses, and we look forward to seeing more options for all SF residents. We support Home SF, and we want to see this passed. We want to see our neighborhood grow, but in the sustainable way with us included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Supervisors. It's a pleasure to be able to speak again. I have housing, But like I said, I want everybody to have housing. Like I've been at the Coronet as of May 5th for 6 years. I was formerly homeless. Why I support this is because I want everybody to have the chance. I mean, like, all the spectrum. And like I've seen the work that Supervisor Tang and the information on this, and we need something for everybody in this city. And like I said, I've been housed in the Coronet cooperation between Institute Aging and Bridge Housing. I was given the chance, and I think SF's home will give everybody from the poor to the rich. And, we need housing so our staff can stay in the city. Some of them live outside of the zone because they can't afford housing in this city. I mean, we have people transporting from Oakland, coming over, staff and support people of the Institute of Aging on Gary Street. But I want everybody to have nice housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Harami. I am the newly elected secretary to the Richmond District Democratic Club, as well as an elected delegate from AD19 to the State Democratic Party. I just wanted to say that I am in favor of growing our housing market, and I am in favor of affordability housing. However, I am not in favor of this bill. Sorry, my notes are right here in front of me as well. If we allow this to pass in its current watered-down form and upzone the city in a way that does nothing for everyday San Franciscans, we will have given away one of our last chances for below-market rate housing and private developments for years, if not a generation. And we shouldn't pass something so momentous without clear affordability requirements. The upzoning of parts of Brooklyn and Queens by the Bloomberg administration in the mid-2000s in New York City was a cautionary tale of the downsides of excessive upzoning for luxury developments. While the expectation was that upzoning would bring down land prices by increasing supply, speculative investment drove these prices up to the point where luxury units were not considered economically infeasible. Let's not make the same mistake in San Francisco. I'd also like to point out that in November, we voted in favor of Prop Q, which now makes it illegal for homeless people to sleep in the streets and have not provided housing for these folks. By expanding the affordable housing requirements and allowing people with higher incomes access to affordable housing, we're taking away the chance of housing 6,700 people who sleep in alleyways between luxury high-rises. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Keith Friedman. I'm a professor at City College, and we've lost some of my colleagues because they started families and they couldn't afford to live here anymore. There are also a lot of teachers in the high school and grade school level that have left San Francisco, and some of those positions don't get filled very fast, if at all, because people can't. They don't want to commute an hour and a half to work, and they can't afford to buy a house here and raise a family. So I encourage you to pass this bill and move it forward. It's not perfect, but I think it's a really, really good start, and as it starts getting implemented, you can always modify it as we see ways to improve it down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Serena Kennerly. I am a mother of 3 children and a small business owner, and I've lived in San Francisco for many years. I see a lot of my friends and other families leaving the city, and this program is a creative solution. I support Home SF. It seems like a great way to be able to provide more housing and also housing for a range of different income levels. And as an architect, I understand how expensive it is to build housing and build in San Francisco, and the building codes just get more and more strict. Each cycle makes it even more expensive. So it is real that it can be infeasible for developers to build, And this is a way to provide more inclusionary, more below market rate housing and have it still pencil out. So thank you. Please support Home SF.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Catherine Howard with the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club supports infill residential and commercial development on unused or underutilized land within city boundaries to achieve equitable housing goals while protecting and enhancing the quality of urban life and the environment. However, we oppose Home SF as currently written for the following reasons. First, the legislation goes beyond the 2016 100% affordable housing ordinance, and yet there has been no robust public process to review this extensively modified legislation. Second, the legislation is being rushed through without proper analysis of its environmental impacts, especially its transit and traffic impacts. Compared to the prior legislation, this program expands neighborhood retail areas subject to the program, but no additional study has been made to assess the impact on transit and traffic of removing thousands of existing neighborhood businesses and forcing residents to travel outside of their neighborhood to meet their daily needs. Third, adequate open space and exposure to nature and the outdoors are important to childhood development. While the legislation calls for family-friendly amenities to include open space and yards designed for use by children, it also grants zoning modifications that allow a reduction of rear yards by 20% and a 10% reduction of open space. It also allows for inner courtyards as open space while eliminating the existing requirement for wider courtyards as wall heights are increased, resulting in dark and rarely used inner courtyards. It also allows new shadows on outdoor recreation and public areas. Although it says they cannot substantially affect these areas, there is no definition of what substantially means. We believe that people have the right to participate in the development of the rules, regulations, plans, and evaluation criteria at every level of decision-making in their communities, and we urge the city to hold meetings for significant community outreach and input before.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Supervisors, Joseph Smook with Housing Rights Committee in the Richmond District and the South of Market Community Action Network. Home San Francisco references the housing balance that voters passed in 2014. If the Tenderloin is exempted from the market rate housing incentive program, so an affordable housing incentive study can be done, then the same should apply to other neighborhoods. The housing balance in District 1 is minus 64%. In District 4, it's minus 197%. In District 7, it's minus 20%. Even in District 6, where it's a positive 17%, this is still far short of the voter-mandated minimum of 33% for low to moderate income and 50% for low to middle income households. In these neighborhoods where I work, the Richmond District and the Sunset and the South of Market, we're seeing a high rate of evictions and reductions of rent-controlled units through owner move-in evictions and Ellis Act evictions. Both Housing Rights Committee and the South of Market Community Action Network requests that Richmond and SOMA have the same consideration as the Tenderloin and be exempted until an affordable housing incentive study can be completed, one that is led from our community-based organizations that work on tenant and affordable housing issues on the ground. I also want to register one other concern, which is the loss of small businesses from vulnerable communities. This can be extremely destabilizing. We still have low-income and immigrant communities here in San Francisco, and we're fighting every day to make sure that people can continue to live here. Without businesses that provide affordable goods and services and those that are linguistically and culturally accessible to people in our communities, we further destabilize people who are vulnerable in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I call up the next speaker, a couple more cards here. Jennifer Stojkovic, Andy Thornley, Jim Lazarus, Corey Smith, Josephine Zhao, Matt Castillion, Alex Lofton.
Oh, okay. Hi, good afternoon. Patty Morse. I've lived here for over 20 years. And I feel this is very important. We need housing policy that is inclusive of working people and families. This legislation will provide housing for moderate and middle income people who are being priced out of the city. We've watched it, I've watched it. The housing prices are ridiculous. We all know that, they're soaring. And I feel that San Francisco stands for diversity and equality, and I've watched my neighborhood change. I live in Lower Nob Hill, and everybody's being priced out there. And I've seen certainly the rents change. Now, I'm lucky I have rent control. However, I've had a situation with my new landlord for the past 8 years, and I had to contact my assembly member, and he's helping, but I'll tell you, I'm scared. I know I've read some very unethical things that the landlords are doing, and we just have to be there for each other right now. So please pass this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Supervisors. Deepa Varma from the San Francisco Tenants Union. I'm glad that for once everyone in the room agrees with me that there's a housing crisis. And I've spent the last 6.5 years fighting evictions myself of low and middle income people. And first as an eviction defense lawyer and then at the Tenants Union. And if I thought that this was going to stop or slow the crisis, I would be here on the other side. But I do not believe that Home SF is going to do this for us. I don't think it's going to fix this problem. And that's because this is not an affordable housing program. This is a market rate program. This is a way for developers to actually make more money. We're trying to solve a market crisis with a market-based solution without really seeing all the facts. And the problem is that this program doesn't actually have enough affordability in it. There's not enough units, and there's not enough affordability for artists to live in these units, or for low-income immigrants, or even for teachers. Behind me is Ken Trey from representing the teachers, and it doesn't even provide housing for teachers until they've been teaching for many, many years. And it's not affordable enough for me or for other folks I know who work in the nonprofit sector. I see tenants every single day with fear in their eyes and being terrified as the prices keep going up, as they have more and more pressure to be thrown out of their homes. And this is only going to drive those prices up, those land values up. We saw it in the Mission when the Mission increased density and was upzoned. The land prices did not come down. The rents did not come down. There's no reason to think that's going to happen here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Ken Trey. I'm here today to represent the United Educators of San Francisco, and we represent the now 6,500 educators who work day in and day out of San Francisco schools. So once again, at a hearing on housing, we hear a number of people talking in the name of educators and teachers. UESF has not taken a position on Home SF, and we are eager to support a new housing policy that will expand the pie of affordability, both for middle-income folks, like some San Francisco educators, and for lower-income folks, like other San Francisco educators. Right now, we feel like Home SF does not quite do that. We know that there are a couple of amendments floating in the ether here at City Hall, and we hope that you get back to work and examine things such as the AMI is deciding who or who cannot participate in Home SF. As previous speakers have suggested, the current AMI, at least from our point of view, will preclude most teachers, let alone our lower income friend paraprofessionals, from participating. We also have a grave concern about 2-bedroom apartments having approximately 600 square feet. We are, in fact, losing 700 teachers this year in the school district. At least a good deal of that has to do with the housing situation in San Francisco. We know we have to have teachers see that they could grow a family in San Francisco. 600 feet is fine for a 1-bedroom apartment with a single person and maybe a couple, but 2 bedrooms and 600 feet is not going to induce younger teachers to think that this is a place that is family friendly. For those reasons and a number more, UESF hopes that City Hall supervisors get back to work and come up with a version
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Frank Noto. I've lived in San Francisco for 30 years. I've been the president of my neighborhood association, still on the board, and the president of my Democratic club. The last speaker was smoking something. My daughter lives in our house with her two daughters. She works for the San Francisco School District. She supervises about 15 teachers in San Francisco schools. She lives with us because she can't afford housing in San Francisco. This is a kind of legislation, and I thank Supervisor Tang and others that can help address that. I hope you will support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Andy Thornley, a resident of the Richmond District. My wife and I are very fortunate people. We're paid well. We're well educated. We have been evicted twice this century from the home that we were renting. We continue to rent in Richmond. We're hanging on by our fingernails. We need more housing. If lucky guys like me and my beautiful wife are getting pushed out by inadequate housing supply, there's a real problem here. We frankly need housing for everybody. If this particular policy is adopted, I will not benefit directly. My family is too wealthy to afford any of the affordable housing, and I don't begrudge that. But indirectly, I think this will help my household and households like mine by creating more housing for the families who bought the house that moved into the house we were living in. If there's more housing, there'll be less pushing. And pushing is pushing us all to bite at each other. So I'm very supportive of this. I've been supportive for the year and a half that we've been talking about it. I've been to community meetings multiple times. I've been working with my neighbors. We've talked about this quite a bit. I love to take my neighbors to Geary Boulevard and 19th Avenue and stand there and take a look at each of the four corners. There's a branch bank, there's a branch bank, there's a branch bank, and there's another branch bank. 3 of those 4 properties only just have a branch bank. The one with housing in it, we'll leave that alone. Can't do anything with that, that's fine. But if Wells Fargo wants to tear down their branch bank and build some housing upstairs and then move back in, I don't know why we wouldn't want to incentivize them to do that so that families can move to the Richmond District and enjoy this wonderful city and be my neighbor. So thank you for bringing this forward. Let's do it.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Jennifer Stojkovic. I'm the Executive Director of SF City. I'm here representing SF City. We have nearly 1,000 member and supporting tech companies, and we are very pleased to support the local affordable housing bonus program, including the Home SF program. We at SF City ardently support the creation of long-term solutions to housing affordability issues in San Francisco. As you are aware, since 1979, San Francisco has been out of compliance with the state density bonus law, which is intended to incentivize developers to construct more affordable housing by providing density bonuses of up to 35% for projects that incorporate on-site affordable units. This law was recently amended to require that all local jurisdictions comply by adopting an implementation program. We believe that the Home SF program is a step in the right direction to bringing the city into compliance and to working towards solving the housing issues currently facing the city. Home SF will deliver great value to the city by ensuring no displacement of existing residents, increasing protection for small businesses, and incentivizing production of middle-income units. Middle-income housing is critical for all members of our community and provide housing opportunities for those in some of the city's most crucial jobs, including teachers, firefighters, and EMS workers. We believe that the only way forward as one city is to work towards developing housing opportunities for San Franciscans across all walks of life and industry. SF City strongly urges the Board of Supervisors to vote in favor of this program. And Supervisor Tang, we commend you and Mayor Lee for your steadfast leadership on this issue.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Jim Lazarus, San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Supervisor Tang, for steadfastly pushing this legislation forward for almost 2 years. As other speakers have said, we have an affordability crisis here, density laws at the state level. We need a local ordinance to comply with that law. As was also said, you can't fix the housing crisis in San Francisco by prohibiting 2/3 of the city's geographic area from being part of the solution. In a small way, what you're proposing will carry citywide the ability through infill and transit corridors and neighborhood commercial areas to grow housing. In 1950, there were over 800,000 people who lived in this city. In 1970, 20% of those people were gone. In 1971, your predecessors at the Board of Supervisors could downzone most of the city without impact because the demand wasn't there. And lo and behold, by the 1980s and 90s, that demand came back. And yet we're sitting on zoning in large parts of the city, which is not of the nature that we need today to meet demand both for units on the market and units through affordable programs. This is a balanced, one more tool in the city's toolbox of dealing with a housing crisis. The Chamber, the business community, representing 2,500 local businesses and 250,000 local employees, supports the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call up a couple other speakers, Bobak Esfandiari, Peter Cohen, Kathy Wu, Brad Solomon, Sonia Traus, Joel Engardio, and Gen Fujioka.
Supervisors, my name is Alex Lofton. Thank you very much for having me. I'm a 6-year resident in a rent-stabilized apartment in District 8. I'm here wearing 2 hats, both as a resident of the city, but also a small business owner that works a lot with people thinking about this very issue on housing. Firstly, I'm a strong supporter of the legislation, and I want to say the first reason is because I'm happy it's going through the representative democratic process. I'm really proud that this is something that we're doing here and continue to work on these problems together. I think it's something that we can start somewhere and keep building. And I think that goes along with the reason why site number 2 I like this is it's very, very smart. It gets at a lot of nuances that oftentimes aren't talked about. Size of units. I actually, kind of contrary to some of the conversations that happened earlier, have heard from teachers specifically that smaller units is a great place to start. To stay in the city with the hope that we can grow from there. And number 3, the reason I am standing up here is because I'm a son of a school teacher and a social worker. And the reason I care so deeply about diversity in our city and diversity of having people like that in our city is because those are the people that both teach our kids and help take care of our society, but also have the energy and the space and mind space to keep fighting for others who are not as fortunate. And by having middle-class folks stay in our city, we can continue to lift up others that aren't so fortunate. And what we are threatened by when we think about not having solutions for all realms of society are those very people who continue to organize on behalf of everyone in the city. So I really strongly urge you to vote in favor of this legislation.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Corey Smith, speaking on behalf of the 300 members of the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition, the 900 petition signers that have supported Home San Francisco over the last couple of years, and the 45,000 people that are going to get to call San Francisco home once we pass this pro-teacher, pro-family, pro-middle class piece of housing legislation. We want to thank Supervisor Katie Tang for her leadership, her courage, and her toughness to do what is right in the face of political pressure. We want to thank the Planning Department, Kirsten, Paolo, and Menica, for traveling all over the city, talking to people about this. Well done. We want to thank all the people that came out here today, because Home San Francisco is critical for our city's diverse and inclusive future. The merits of the legislation honestly speak for themselves, but I, like many people in this room, was probably paying attention to the French election yesterday, and I was ecstatic by the results. You know, what's going on around the entire world is happening here in the United States, and it's happening here in San Francisco, and it's all centered around this question of what type of city do we want to be? I was thrilled that the French said no to nativism, said no to the fear of outsiders, said no to the fear of change, and instead said yes to inclusiveness, yes to diversity, yes to hope, and yes to the future. Because to me, that's exactly what the American dream is. It's the idea that if you come here, and if you work hard, and if you treat people the right way, everybody is welcome. That's the world I want to live in the future. That's the country I want to live in the future, and that's the city I want to live in the future. And you can be damn sure I, like many others, will fight for it. So I ask you today to say yes to that American dream, say yes to my future, and vote yes for Home San Francisco, because everybody deserves a home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Matthew Castiglione. I
I'm lucky to have found housing here in San Francisco, but my peers who work in the city have not been so fortunate. Because the city is so unaffordable, they move to places like Walnut Creek, Brisbane, Redwood City, in order to actually find a place to live so that they can work here. But because they live in areas that are not as transit accessible, they end up driving to the city, which ends up taking a toll on their own health as well as the rest of our health in the city because of the increased carbon emissions that will come of this. The great thing about HomeSF is that it incentivizes development in transit corridors, allowing people to take public transit to do their day-to-day jobs. And because of that, I hope you support us at HomeSF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, supervisors. My name is Jerry. I have one picture to show to us to share.
SF Gov TV overhead, please.
Yeah, this picture is in the Chinatown. I think this environment is still the same. This picture is the photo before 2 years ago. I have a visit to the registered voter, and then I'm very confused why they are living in this small space, and then this living room is near the senior rooms. And then if some cooker is near your bed, that's the very surprise and amazing. But San Francisco is the famous city and a model city. But some residents is still living in the past time. So I know that San Francisco will be provide more affordable housing for different level resident is available. And then right now, if we just concern some level, I think that's unfair because someone is low income, is above low income. There is the middle level. There is a very hard and very difficult in San Francisco. You know, every year the property freeze is very higher and higher.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Brad Solomon, and I am here in support of Home San Francisco. In a January 2017 report, the New York Times reported that the lowest percentage of children by far of any major city in the country is in San Francisco at 13%. And frankly, as a native San Franciscan, I find that embarrassing. We need to do something now to find a way to bring families back to our city. I'm very fortunate. I'm an attorney. My wife's a doctor. We can afford to live in San Francisco, and nothing about this legislation is going to change our lives, but we need to change the lives of so many others. In a city that prides itself on its diversity, there's an irony in the fact that we are the least diverse socioeconomic city in America. We need to do something now. This legislation offers us 40% of its housing at least 2 bedrooms. That's an opportunity for working families such as teachers, police, artists to move back to the city or allow them to stay here. I don't think it's saying too much to say that the future of our city is at stake with this piece of legislation. One last thing. We've heard a lot of speakers today, fortunately not a lot, but some speak against the legislation, and I really feel bad for these folks because in a way I really feel they're their own worst enemies. They just keep saying it's not good enough. This is good enough. Let's vote for Home San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Kathy Wu, and I'm sick today. I have fever today, and I cannot talk well today, but I still have to come here to talk to you about Home San Francisco. I support Home San Francisco because my tenant who live in my basement had a hard time to move, finding a place to move. When my mother, 92 years old mother, needed moving downstairs. So Home San Francisco is very important for those people can have a house to move to. So it is time that we build more houses for my tenant. And please support Home San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Well, supervisors, my name is Bob Akisfandiari, and I've got a few butterflies because I don't do this very often, but I'm going to try my best to go fast. I'm a Richmond District resident, and technically I do qualify for below market rate housing currently, although there are a lot of folks that are needier than me. I'm also part of a group of neighbors, some who are here, that we're self-organizing ourselves under the mantra, Grow the Richmond, because we're trying to organize and advocate for more housing in the Richmond District and everywhere in the city, and we believe Home SF will go a long way towards making that possible. My story is simple and really frustrating. I was born in the East Bay in 1990, and I was told for 18 years of my life that I needed to work hard, get a good education, play by the same set of rules as everyone else, and I'd be able to earn a living for myself. I went to school in the South Bay, became a field organizer for President Obama's re-election campaign, and after that was successful, I got a job at a small startup here in San Francisco. I've been told by my teachers, my parents, elected officials, and basically all of American society for my entire life that if you do the right thing, you work hard, you can make it here if you try. But I couldn't find a place to live. I searched for months and months after I got hired, and I couldn't find anything that even remotely fit my budget. Not in San Francisco, not in the Peninsula, and nowhere in the East Bay. I was stuck in my family home. I despaired and got a leg up eventually from my family to find a unit here, but not everyone has that option. In fact, most people don't. We should not try to solve the housing crisis in the Bay Area by adding a tiny amount of affordable housing to a list where the applicants generally have a less than 5% chance of successfully getting picked to rent or buy this below market rate housing. Additionally, we should be building programs and systems that do not create cliffs for people so they have to choose between accepting a raise or earning little enough to continue to qualify to have a roof over their head. Please pass Home SF and help us put a dent in the housing shortage. Give us real solutions. Help us drive down the rent for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Joel Engardio. I live on the west side in District 7. We're mostly homeowners, and we want to preserve our neighborhoods. Conventional wisdom says you don't get very far on the west side if you dare to talk about more housing density or height. But I ran for supervisor in District 7 last year as a pro-housing candidate. I talked about building up to 5 stories of housing above retail on transit corridors like West Portal Avenue. I did not win. But something interesting happened. I came in second with 42% of the vote. There were other candidates with more money, more institutional support who called for no housing in District 7, 0 height increase. But I got more votes. Attitudes are changing on the west side. Yes, we still want to preserve our neighborhoods of single-family homes, but we're open to building a few stories of housing that includes middle income and family housing on our transit and commercial corridors. Longtime residents have realized it's in their interest if they want their adult kids and grandkids to stay in San Francisco. Seniors like the idea of being able to downsize to an elevator building in their neighborhood or close to it. And West Side homeowners want more amenities. We're tired of empty storefronts on our commercial corridors. We realize housing above retail will bring the foot traffic that will attract the stores we want. Home SF addresses all of these needs, and there's more people on the West Side than you think who are willing and ready for common sense housing solutions like Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Supervisor Tang Perkin. My name is Tommy Tang. I live District 4. San Francisco is supposed to have build some more housing for all of the community. Like my family, they live in San Francisco. 3 generations live in one small unit because they cannot force the big unit. So I saw many empty space, so they build some more housing, such as Visitation Valley. You got a big open space. Why don't build some more housing over there to make San Francisco more comfortable? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, good afternoon, Supervisor. My name is Michael Kong. I support Home SF. Many of us come to the city because our parents have been here as immigrants, but hard to find a place to live. A family would live in a one-bedroom, triangular, and hard near Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Amy Zhou. 我哋係嚟移民嚟美唔係好耐嘅新移民，亦都係喺呢度好努力工作嘅一代新移民。
Can you hold on 1 second? I'm sorry. 等一下。Okay, we're gonna 我们会找一个可以帮你翻译的，或者有人可以帮你翻译吗 ？Okay. Can you come up then? If you're going to translate. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to reset your time. 等一下。Okay, 可以。
My name is Amy Zhou。我係新一代嘅移民，嚟咗美國呢就係幾年，我亦都係好努力咁樣喺三藩市去工作。咁呢，因為而家三藩市嘅房價呢就係越嚟越高，咁我哋呢新一代嘅移民亦都好想有一個穩定嘅家，咁呢就係希望呢就係見多啲可負擔房，咁能夠喺度三藩市可以即係既工作嘅同時，亦都可以享受一個家庭嘅生活。
My name is Annie Zhou. I've been a recent immigrant. My family came to the city, but we worked really, really hard and wish that we could have a good space to live, affordable housing, so that our family would look like a family, that we can stay together with a more relaxed environment. I think we should support.
Yeah, we support the Home San Francisco.
Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you. 谢谢。Next speaker, please.
My name is Josephine Zhao, betterhousingpolicies.org. My family of 7 moved to the Sunset area a few years ago because my daughter had kidney failures when she was 4. We had a hard time finding housing, and eventually we had to buy with everything we had. Yet we still have to share our 2,000 square feet with renters. I don't think that given today's market, we can ever buy again. And we would have had to commute with our daughter every day for her to get treatment. Please support Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Sonia. I'm here as myself and also part of EMB Party and SF Bay Area Renters Federation. We all support Home SF because it creates more housing. This is the first time that I think that I'm testifying for housing that I would qualify for. I've testified for a lot of housing that I wouldn't be able to afford because more housing is more housing. You know, building anything is better than nothing in our current shortage. Also, I think the Bernie-crats would have, both of them, been able to live in the proposed housing because it serves a wide range of incomes. Yeah, I'm it this time. My boyfriend and I spend $3,000 a month to live in a 650 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment, and I'm pregnant, and so we'll probably just stay there indefinitely. So we'll be a family in a 1-bedroom apartment. I would obviously much rather live in a 2-bedroom, 900 square foot apartment. Even if that apartment didn't have a yard, we'd still be better off because our current apartment doesn't have a yard either. A lot of opponents to Home SF are homeowners living in houses with maybe their spouse and many rooms who are valiantly trying to protect me and my boyfriend from having to live in such a 950 square foot 2-bedroom. And to them, I say, no thanks. That doesn't help me. Like, I'd much rather be in someplace bigger than the situation I am now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, supervisors. My name is Nick Carnero. Today I'm speaking on behalf of Grow the Richmond. We're a group of about 88 neighbors organizing for more housing in District 1. We urge you to vote yes on Home SF. Supervisor Fewer, if you're watching on the live feed, more people move to our neighborhood every year, but the buildings stay the same size. The resulting spike in evictions should not come as a surprise to anyone who has read President Obama's Housing Development Toolkit. Before the president left office, he published a report explaining that restrictive zoning causes shortages which favor the wealthy, and inclusionary zoning, like Home SF, helps working families access opportunity. And yes, we know this is a contentious issue. When we talk on Facebook and on Nextdoor and on Clement Street, we discuss displacement. But the good news is this is a piece of zero displacement legislation. It is pragmatic and an incremental improvement over the status quo, and I think we should follow the former president's lead here. Please vote yes on Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before the next speaker, a couple more cards. Angelique Mahan, David Salaberry, Jerry Guo, Michael Kong, Sherman King, Tommy Tang, and Skylar Taylor. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good afternoon, members of the Board of Supervisors, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Hans von Rashid Zittler. Well-educated with PhD in physics, involved in also PhD doctorate in theology, and yada, 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 yada. And so I'm with the YIMBY party, I'm with the YIMBYs, I am with Asian societies, SFBARF, and all that good stuff. So check this out. One day I was riding along in my beautiful automobile, and I came upon this beautiful city called San Francisco, where the weather is fine, but lo, no housing. I wonder what must we do? Well, we have to build more housing. Duh. We have 7,000 people living on the streets. We have people stuck in shelters. We have people crammed in one bedroom. 600 square foot rooms, and they're getting ready to have children. So what must they do? Fly to Mars? I don't think so. We have to build more housing. So I say, support Home SF. It's the logical way to go. It's the only way to go. We can no longer delay the inevitable. Any more delay, we're going to end up having a rent like $10,000 a month. And I don't think anybody wants that. All right? So vote SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Members of the board, Gen Fujioka with Chinatown Community Development Center. And I'm here to express some concerns about the current form of the legislation. I want to make it clear that we support generally density, we support growing taller and more housing. So I don't think the choice here is between more or less housing. It's how we grow it. And I also want to be clear, I think all of us in this room are concerned about preserving small businesses and jobs in the neighborhoods as well. So I think questions along those lines shouldn't be posed as threats to housing, but as legitimate concerns. I want to speak specifically about Chinatown and some surrounding neighborhoods. This is a map of Chinatown with the areas in blue.
Guys have Gov TV overhead, please.
The areas that are in blue are the areas of Chinatown mixed-use areas, which will be included within Home SF. We know a number of these sites have residential properties, in which case they would be protected or not covered. But there are other sites and some very significant potential development sites where we think that we could do much better than what's proposed by Home SF. And indeed, under Home SF, with 70% of the housing on a Home SF site to be market rate, and the other affordable being much out of reach of the neighborhood. In its current form, 90% of our neighborhood will not be able to afford Home SF units in the developments. We think that there is a solution. It's built into the legislation. There is a provision which exempts the Tenderloin, where pending a study to examine how we develop more affordable housing for both low and middle income residents, and we would support that legislation.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, distinguished honorable members. My name is Marvin Jablonski. I'm a resident of Soma. I'm here as a tenant association from Community Housing Partnership, even though I'm not speaking on behalf of Community Housing Partnership, out of respect to them. I came here 3 years ago as a resident of New York. I lived my whole life there. My family had a similar process to Alice Act evictions. They were flipped out of their units. I came in here as an indigent and was very lucky to be afforded a program through Community Housing Partnership. And to sort of dovetail to the previous speaker, I think there should be a low income element that should be taken into consideration. Hopefully, in terms of looking at fixed income, especially. I know that there's a lot of considerations that go into a lot of urban planning, but I just ask that you spare a wish for those lowliest to gather in their stalls. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Testing. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Angelique Mahan. I am not here on any organization. If I named them all off, I've been around too long, and nobody wants to hear it. What we really want to talk about today, the thing that I find most important is, like I said, hi, Supervisor Tang. My grandmother came here with 2 kids and 2 dogs, at least that's the story that she tells, and made a life for herself. She lived in the Crocker Amazon projects, which do not exist anymore. Now there's an open space, Crocker Amazon Park, which a lot of our neighbors go and play soccer in, bully for the peninsula. Having said that, it was a town that people could come in and build a life in. We really don't have that anymore. And I think it's important that while Home SF is not the perfect solution, I'm actually going to show a little faith in my supervisors to believe that they will work very diligently to make sure that these programs and things that are issues will be worked out for the betterment of the community. They haven't always worked, but I'm going to show a little faith in you guys this time. At the end of the day, with all the objections that have come up, which were actually very relevant, very real, and very justifiable, I'm going to err on, I don't want to see this project die because we are working so hard for the perfect. The perfect should not be the enemy of the good. The good is we need to build housing. We need to make sure that people that live in the Excelsior don't have 5 families living in one home and have an opportunity, if they are economically viable, to be able to create, generate, and sustain a home. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and defer the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Laura Clark with YIMBY Action. Understand that the supervisors have some other engagements, and so I'd like all of the members who are here to support Home SF to please stand. And everybody who is struggling with housing, raise their hand. This is the community of people who are in desperate need for more housing in this city. We are asking you to step up and build the housing that we so urgently need. We have spent decades chronically underbuilding housing, and this is an opportunity to take a step in the right direction and to ask some of our neighborhoods that have built almost nothing over the past 30 years to take a part of the density burden. We all need to be building housing in every neighborhood. This is a great opportunity that proves that affordable and market rate housing are not in opposition. We can do both and. This is a great program that will add more units of subsidized affordable, more units of middle-income housing, and more high-income to take pressure off of existing communities. If we continue to chronically underbuild housing, all we will do is watch more and more of our middle and low-income people be displaced. Please pass Home SF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Oz Erickson. I'm chairman of Emerald Fund. We have built approximately 3,000 units of housing in the city. We're here to support strongly Home SF. And I've given you an example of the Mission site, the Safeway site on Mission Street. Under the old, without Home SF, we were able to build about 145 units. With Home SF, we are able to build 287 units. We originally started looking at this project in May of 2015, where the BMR requirement was 12%. When the BMR requirement was raised to 25%, we abandoned it. We have attached to those documents as exhibits of what the additional BMR requirement does to us building. And we asked the city if they would like to order our books. We'd be fine to do it. This program, under this program, we're able to build way more affordable housing, 86 units as opposed to 31. It is a huge difference. I would strongly advise you to pass this. This helps the unions build these housings. It helps people of varying means live in these housing, and it's altogether a huge shot in the arm for San Francisco housing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Peter Cohen, Council of Community Housing Organizations. Seeing that this legislation is likely to move forward rather quickly, I'll just get to the chase. There's a lot of important and devilish details in making good housing policy, and while I don't offer a flat position on Home SF, I do offer some very specific amendments which you might consider friendly amendments for fine-tuning. The first is unit pricing. There's obviously a desire to have moderate and middle-income housing in San Francisco, and you have some income targeting, but the actual market rate of housing is very different across the city. Our suggestion is to use what we used in the Prop A bond, the mayor's bond, which was that in all cases, no pricing should be more than 20% below the local market pricing. It just makes sense whether it's rentals or condos. And that be prescribed in your ordinance, and the Mayor's Office of Housing be required to adjust the allowable unit pricing accordingly. That would just be good, smart policy to ensure middle income, in fact, is below market. Secondly, are how you can ensure more family housing by having minimum unit sizes and a good unit mix. We use in affordable housing something that comes from the state of California that establishes minimum unit sizes for family housing. And I think this should be applied to Home SF and inclusionary for that matter. So if we're talking here about family housing, you're using established standards for minimum unit sizes based on livability and, frankly, very long established empirical evidence. Those numbers are used by our Mayor's Office of Housing on a daily basis. And then lastly is unit mix. There's talk about 40% 2 bedrooms or larger. Really, 3 bedrooms is essential. And if you don't have a requirement for some minimum amount, I don't think you're going to get it from the natural market. Our suggestion is 40% or more at 2 bedrooms or larger, with at least 10% being at 3 bedrooms. That way you're assured to get some level of those real family-sized units. We're happy to work with you on other amendments if you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before the next speaker, I have a couple more cards. Fernando Marti, Anastasia Yovanopoulos, Jim Morrell, Ozzie Ram, Carol Britshigi, Jim Warshell, Mike Sizemore.
My name's Richard Christiani, and I'm an architect. I've been practicing here in the city for over 30 years, and it's my focus of my work is predominantly multifamily housing. And I've also was a member of the Zoning Adjustment Board over in Berkeley, and where we implemented the state density bonus. And as somebody, as a practitioner, and studying sites and what can go on a site, I will say that what's before you now will provide the greatest level of density, which would be the goal, but also the targeting 40% 2 bedrooms is something that the state density bonus doesn't do, and would promote a more diversified and family-oriented housing. So I'm strongly in support of this, and hope that it passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Vincent. Nice to see everybody again. I want to echo previous speakers who said that this is good, common sense legislation that makes an impact. It's not going to solve SF's housing crisis overnight, but it will do something for some people, which is better than what we have done historically, which is nothing for pretty much anyone. So, great start. Thank you for working on this. I really appreciate it. There's just something that an earlier speaker said that really struck me. I believe it was the Sierra Club representative who opened with, "We support urban infill development," and then went on to list all the reasons that she didn't support this urban infill development measure. I just thought that was really strange. That's all.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm here on my own accord. I might be the token Islander representative of this forum. I am not going to talk about social constructs, anything else. All I'm here to talk about is sustainability. I am pro Home SF for one reason and one reason only: it promotes density. We've argued over the last couple decades about displacing carbon emissions, displacing everything. Every unit that we build in the city displaces roughly 50% of carbon emissions. On average, a city dweller will emit 30 metric tons of carbon emissions a year, as opposed to a suburban dweller that can emit 60 plus. Every day of my adult life, I've woken up just thinking about reducing carbon emissions. Currently, I manage close to 200,000 solar systems across America, but nothing can reduce carbon emissions more than building higher, building denser, building more. So I am, unlike our friends at the Sierra Club in San Francisco who block this great legislation, completely for Home SF. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Anastasia Yovanopoulos, member of Noe Neighborhood Council and a Sierra Club member, in full support of the letter written to Mayor Ed Lee and Supervisor Katie Tang. If you take a look at the points. Thank you. Home SF relies in part on the demolition of single-story businesses along neighborhood commercial corridors so developers can build taller and thereby gain housing density and benefit directly from an increased financial bonus. If passed, it will severely affect small businesses in our neighborhoods. Landlords can drive the rents up to force them out or not renew their leases. Small businesses will have to relocate at great cost, causing economic hardship. This will wreck their business plans and projections and threaten livelihoods. It will destroy the fabric of our neighborhoods and the neighborhoods serving businesses as we know them. What Noe Neighborhood Council is against is merchant displacement. This will mean more expensive shops, making it harder to afford what's on our commercial corridor for the merchants as well as the consumers. Plus, there are often small-scale homes on a commercial strip that will be dwarfed and robbed of light, air, and privacy with the added height bonus. Home SF has yet to be presented at the Planning Commission, hearing it for review. Nevertheless, on Thursday, April 27th, they approved the Home SF provision linked to the version of including housing, which seems odd to me. Planning Commission hasn't had any opportunity to review the affordable housing density bonus design guidelines, exceptions, etc., contained in this Home SF legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to clarify, the Planning Commission has heard Home SF specifically a couple times already. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Jim Morrell. I'm a 35-year resident of Noe Valley, and I'm here today to oppose Home SF as written. The Home SF legislation is flawed in many ways. For one, it will result in merchants' displacement in our neighborhood commercial corridors. It's an incentive for property owners on commercial strips to evict merchants and build tall and out-of-scale buildings which will fetch higher rents. These higher rents will be passed on to us, the residents, who rely on these shops in our neighborhood. This is another version of HBP that was resoundingly rejected by the San Francisco residents last year. It has now been resurfaced with a new name, but with the same terrible impact as the old version. We agreed last year that any density bonus offered in exchange for affordable housing should apply only to soft sites. Why this now? Why victimize our merchants community and build 6, 7-story towers in our neighborhood commercial districts that are small scale, similar to the low density neighborhoods where they're located in? Why drive rents up in our commercial strips and thereby make our neighborhood shops unaffordable to neighborhood residents? Who will benefit from this? The vast majority of low to middle income folks will still have no access to these newly minted units because there won't be enough BMR units created to address the need. But there will be a good number of merchants displaced as a result of this, and that's what we cannot stand for. I urge you to change this legislation to only apply to soft sites. Take our neighborhood commercial districts out of this. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. And if anyone else who's here who I didn't call, just please line on up. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Ozzie Rome with Noe Neighborhood Council. I'm here today to express our opposition to Home SF, which is a rebranded version of HBP that was resoundingly rejected by the San Francisco residents last year. This legislation has many of the same problems as its predecessor from last year, namely displacing merchants, driving commercial rent prices up, and thereby making shopping unaffordable to neighborhood residents, upzoning commercial strips, which would in effect wreck the scale at the street level. City planning is all about scale at the street level. Enabling developers to build up regardless of the narrowness of the street and the small scale of the surrounding buildings will result in out-of-scale and out-of-character buildings that will stick out of the block like Mordor towers. Here's what I'm talking about. Overhead, please. I have a picture of 24th Street today, and if we are going to have Home SF, that's what it's going to look like. Specifically, this is the building I'm talking about. Also, it is not going to be fair to small-scale homes that are going to be located on these commercial strips, and there are not too few of them. We do have quite a bit on 24th Street. Here's an example, and you can see here where this little home, little small-scale Victorian, is sitting right next to the big new building. Finally, what about affordability? Well, this legislation is not going to provide enough affordability. And all the harm that it's going to provide is not going to be worth the affordability for a few BMR units that it's going to provide. I see a lot of children here today, and I wish I could bring my kid, but she's at work. And no, she's not an artiste or a teacher.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Carol Britschke, and I'm a native of the Noe Valley District, and I'm here to express my opposition to Home San Francisco. Adding building height to buildings in narrow commercial strips is not city planning, which is all about scale. I live near 24th Street, a narrow commercial corridor in Noe Valley where the street is lined with small-scale 1 to 2, 3-story buildings. We have small Victorian single-story homes next to 3-story newer buildings. Increasing the height will have a huge negative impact on such homes by dwarfing them and effectively robbing them from sunlight. Is it fair to box in small homes on these commercial strips in the name of densification? Is it fair to evict longtime merchants to make room for mortar towers in the name of creating affordability? Is it fair to drive prices up for us who shop in our neighborhood commercial districts? Why not implement this program on soft sites, which is what we all agreed on last year? Why this change of direction? I urge you to change Home San Francisco to only apply to soft sites so that our neighborhood commercial corridors will not be negatively impacted. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Jim Warshaw. I'm speaking on behalf of the Van Ness Corridor Neighborhoods Coalition. It's 10 neighborhood groups ranging from Cathedral Hill, Pack Heights, Russian Hill, Lower Middle Polk, Golden Gate, Hayes Valley Neighborhood, West Soma. So a very diverse group. Our concerns really are mostly around the impacts that this will have on legacy businesses, long-term neighborhood commercial sites. We firmly support the idea of development along transit-rich corridors. We want to see more housing, but you can improve this by really focusing on the soft sites. Nobody will miss a parking lot, a gas station, or the Four Corner Bank situation. These are unnecessary. This is an ideal place to start this. We can move in stages. We need to protect our legacy businesses. We don't need to see lots that are small suddenly combined into mega projects. 15,000-foot lots are ideal for development. Anything below that, more questionable. Think of the businesses that could be lost in your districts. Luca's on Chestnut, Perry's on Union Street, Cole Hardware on Cole Street, Clay Theater on Fillmore, Brown's Hardware on Polk, on Van Ness Avenue, Tommy's Joint, or the House of Prime Ribs. Be very careful how you treat these legacy businesses. They're part of what makes San Francisco home to us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Laura Dasa. I'm a housing case manager for the Bill Sarro Housing Program in the South of Market. I'm here because I'm against this legislation. The majority, actually 91% of the clients that we serve at our program are under 60% AMI. And it seems like a lot of the people who are in support of Home SF do not understand that this legislation is expanding the housing opportunities for middle and moderate income at the expense of lower income households. So currently, the inclusionary program assigns 12% of every building for affordable units, and with the proposition by Supervisors Safai, Tang, and Breed, it will be cut to 6%. So everybody here, including me, I want to see more housing for everyone, also for moderate and middle income households, but not at the expense of our families. I see some people here concerned about the environmental impact of displacements from our families. And however, some of you have the choice or the option to pay a $3,000 one bedroom unit, but our low-income households have to move out to Modesto, to Patterson, to Tracy, and they are driving here every day. They are bringing their kids to school here every day. So I don't know what will be better for not only for these families but for the environment. So I hope that you also consider that these lower income families have no other choice but to continue applying for the lotteries. Many of them have been applying for many years, over 4 years, and they've had not.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Theodore Randolph. I live in the Excelsior district, a couple blocks away from Safai, and my concern is that the zoning for the city doesn't match the function. On my block, we have a lot of it's zoned RH2, and we have a lot of buildings that were built as single-family houses, but they're housing loads and loads of single adults, working-age adults, and what we need is changes to the zoning so that we can have houses that match our actual needs. I mentioned to Safai that I was living with 7 roommates, and he was like, "That sounds illegal." And he thought, maybe I'll crack down on that. My landlord assures me that what he's doing is legal. He's like very carefully toed the line there. But I'm concerned that there's so little affordability. So my landlord was scared of rent control, so he was trying to avoid letting families live in his house. So what we need is incentives to do upzoning, and do upzoning so that families can live in the city, not restricted just to an upzoning that's very rich type of housing that's like a fantasy land for the rich people. Maybe a few affordable units for to make you feel better about having the expensive housing, and also not stop the upzoning because we have a fantasy of we need more square feet. So I support Home SF, and I think we should pass this and then go further.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Eric Dew. I'm in District 3 with Mr. Peskin's area. I'm for Home SF, and I think it's a very good idea because it is helping in growing more affordable, more homes. But I think the city and the Board of Supervisors has to be more ambitious and have to be more bold. 5,000 units in 20 years is a drop in a bucket when we're thinking maybe another 500,000 people will be coming in by, in 20 years. You need to think more boldly and more ambitiously to get that to be successful. And I have a template for you, and the template is the city of Paris. Paris is a city of 2.2 million people living on a land of 40 square miles. That's smaller than San Francisco and triple the density of what we have right now. If they can do it, I think you guys can figure out how to make that happen, okay? And in 20 years, if you can get somewhere close to that, and maybe you couldn't quite get an Eiffel Tower, I think we would be happy with the compromise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please, and anyone else who I haven't called, please come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Liederman. I'm a 27-year resident of the Inner Sunset, and I do want a diverse and inclusive city that protects current residents from eviction and welcomes diverse newcomers. I appreciate the improvements to this proposal since its earlier incarnation as AHBP that protect all residences from demolition. But I think more work is needed. While the city accepts without question that new market rate and luxury units boast literally thousands of square feet of living space, this proposal purports to provide family housing, but it sets no minimum unit size. It purports to provide affordable housing, but completely omits everyone between 55 and 80% of AMI. It recognizes its impacts on small businesses, but its success relies on their demise. For this program to produce any meaningful numbers of so-called affordable units, it must displace small businesses in large numbers. It does this by inviting developers to build more market rate housing in their place. This in turn raises land values and incentivizes landowners to sell. Sounds to me pretty much like the same process that motivates residential landowners to sell and has caused so many of our evictions. Small businesses are a vital source of jobs and neighborhood services that make our neighborhoods walkable, that keep us out of our cars. They are also at the core of neighborhood character and community. We need reasonable square footage requirements for family units. We need to focus on soft sites that don't target small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Paul Kangas. There's a way we can lower the cost of housing in San Francisco. San Francisco just passed a law, thanks to Supervisor Scott Wiener, that requires all new construction be solar powered. If we would amend that law and require, like Lancaster, California does, that all new housing and buildings in San Francisco be 100% solar powered. That's already the law in Lancaster. That can lower the cost of energy down to zero eventually. It'll create jobs by doing this. And plus we have Senate Bill 71, which is now before the California Assembly, to do the same thing. We need a solar economy here because the number one issue we face is global warming. And we can speak to this issue directly by building more solar-powered houses here. We already have the law in Sebastopol, Lancaster, California, San Francisco. Now if California passes this law requiring all new construction be solar and it ups it to 100%, like Lancaster has done already 6 years ago, then we lower the cost of housing, we lower the cost of energy in this country because we want to shut down coal, oil, gas, and nukes before the earthquake, which will shut down Diablo Canyon in a serious manner and destroy the California economy. So we need to be pushing for solar now before the crisis happens, like just happened in Australia last summer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Supervisors. Dennis Antonori. I'm also a long-term resident of the Inner Sunset, and I love my neighborhood. And I'd like to say that neighborhoods are not some abstract concept. Neighborhoods are made up of people. They're real people. They're the people that are your constituents. And the effect of a program like this, which is basically a form of redevelopment, is to really destroy neighborhoods without really respecting what the value of those neighborhoods are. We have a history in San Francisco, as everybody knows, of the redevelopment projects that destroyed neighborhoods, that never recovered, and that every effort to rebuild those neighborhoods as neighborhoods has failed, and the entire redevelopment projects have been, especially from the Western Addition projects, was a failure and continues to be a failure that really hurts us all today. Back in New York, where Robert Moses had his great schemes of solving so many problems, he destroyed neighborhood after neighborhood. And to this day, you go to New York and people regret the loss of their neighborhoods. It's something you cannot recover. Once they're gone, they're gone. And the effect on people is something that we really need to take into account, not just abstract concepts and statistics and affordability levels and everything else, but what about people? And what about the effects on real people and their lives and the quality of their lives?
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Milo Traus. A few things to say. One about scale and like walkability. So one, just because it'll be different and maybe taller, that does not mean it's out of scale or unpleasant. I was just fortunate enough to visit some cities in Northern Europe that are very old. One is Lille in northern France, which is very narrow streets, cobblestone, and it's an entirely 4- and 5-story city. And I think everyone in here, if they had a chance to go, would agree that it's very pleasant and nice. And so if we saw taller buildings along our commercial corridors, yes, it might be new and different, but I think it could also be beautiful. extending, on that beauty, it would also be beautiful because more people would have access to affordable living. So one thing that I heard in sitting here is that this notion of somehow restricting overall building and focusing on only funding affordable subsidized units will get us to a place where it's cheaper for more people is inaccurate description. That will lead us to a position where we have a small amount of subsidized units, but never enough to meet the need of everybody, and an increased demand for them because of the overall constricted supply. And finally, some people said this is an anti-business piece of legislation, but the San Francisco Small Business Commission and SF Council of District Merchants both support this. And the SF Council of District Merchants represents 29 different neighborhood merchants associations.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please, and anyone else.
Calvin Amolde, San Franciscans for Community Planning. If density alone solved affordability, then San Francisco and New York would be the two most affordable cities in the United States. They're the two most dense cities in the United States. So clearly, something else has to happen than mere density. Lowering a developer's cost does not necessarily lower the price of the unit. That's the magic of the marketplace. And some sense must be paid to the way the market actually works. And the way that it actually works is that you specify, you get benefits, a density bonus, for requirements, regulations. This ordinance is a little generous on what it offers and a little stingy on what it requires. It needs 3 amendments. One, that BMR units are actually BMR by neighborhood. Neighborhood income in San Francisco, neighborhood medians differ dramatically. We need the language to be extended that's in the existing ordinance to include both the density bonus units and the inclusionary units to ensure that they are in fact 20% below market rate costs in those neighborhoods. Second of all, we need to protect neighborhood serving retail businesses by limiting their displacement and requiring their, or at least a similar sized development, commercial development being in the new development. And finally, we need to apply the affordable housing incentive study to every neighborhood that would qualify for Home SF that in fact has median household income.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public who wish to comment on item 2? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Chair, I'll close public comment.
Public comment is now closed.
I do want to thank everyone who came out to speak and offer your amendments. Of course, as we mentioned, this has been a multi-year process that has been to Planning Commission multiple times. We've made so many amendments, which I've summarized here for committee members, in response to these concerns. There is, on the last note about businesses, we have included a requirement specific to Home SF that during a Planning Commission review, there must be 5, and today I'm going to make an amendment for 6 findings that a Planning Commission must make around small businesses or business displacement. And the last amendment I'm making today has to do with legacy business and whether it's that or formula retail that is being displaced over at the ground floor. So I think that we have really taken into a lot of considerations. Our analysis on Home SF and its 20-year period of time was analyzed over around 200 parcels, soft-site parcels, and of that, we anticipate that potentially 5 businesses would be impacted each year over the 20-year life of this program. That is not, we never want to displace any businesses, but I feel that we have in this program done everything we possibly can, running up against up until what we are prohibited from doing under state law. I just want to point out one thing. the Sunset District is not exempt from this program. I heard one speaker say that, but that is not true. I do want to emphasize that area plans are excluded, and we do need to build outside of areas that have seen a lot of development, such as the Mission, Soma, and so forth. We need to build in outer neighborhoods, such as the Sunset. Currently, there are also about 8 projects in the pipeline waiting to use the state density bonus law. And so my goal is to really make it more attractive for developers to use a local version, which again does not allow for displacement of existing residential units. So I feel that we do have a lot of answers to many questions that have come up over the years. But at this point, colleagues, I'd like to adopt some amendments, first of all. One is to, as I mentioned, add an additional finding that the Planning Commission must make related to business displacement regarding legacy businesses and formula retail. Number 2, to clarify the income levels, that the income levels for the below market rate units are independent of the income levels in Section 415 of the Planning Code. They do mirror those levels at the moment, but regardless of what happens there, our income levels will remain what we have proposed. Number 3, it clarifies that the bedroom unit mix requirements that we have in here, which are 40% 2 bedrooms or larger, or 50% mix of containing some 3-bedroom units, they supersede any other bedroom requirement for provisions under the Planning Code that might come down in the future. And lastly, removing the Fillmore NCT and Divisadero NCT from the program. They were originally included as part of the program, but we've been asked to remove them from the community pending further discussion. So colleagues, those are the amendments that I would like to motion to approve for today.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Tang.
So before we vote on that, given that those amendments just arrived, can we just walk through this a large piece of legislation where those are, if we can just walk through those 4 amendments? The additional finding.
Right. Sorry, I don't have the page numbers memorized at the moment, but I will look that up for you.
Is that finding K? Is that?
It would be the last finding on page. Okay, so removal of the Fillmore and Divisadero NCT you'll find specifically on page 11, lines 18 and 19, and then there are references throughout because we had originally been asked, again, to include it, but that is the main section where that is.
Got it. And just relative to that, presumably you want to change, this is just, I don't know who did this, but I think you would then want to strike D and make it C, is that correct? And then you'd want to strike E and make it D. Is that correct?
Our City Attorney Audrey Pearson is here.
Supervisor, that is correct. We would want to strike D and make it C, and then E and make it D, and F and make that E.
Seems like that makes sense. Okay, so that's that amendment.
Page 12, line 16 through 19.
Page 12, line 16 through 19, sub 8. Complies with the on-site inclusionary affordable housing option set forth in Planning Code Section 415.6.
As well as page 13, you'll see that starting lines 9 through, I think, 20.
Wait, let me just understand this. This is the applicability section, right? Under this section 206.3 shall be a project that 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 complies with the on-site inclusionary affordable housing options set forth in 415.6, which is another discussion that we're having next week, right?
That is correct. But actually, sorry, the main point is page 13, lines 9 through kind of continuing to the next page. But this just shows that our income brackets, the 55% AMI, 80, 110 for rentals, and 90, 120, 140 for ownership, that they would be equally distributed at 10%, 10%, 10% at each bracket to equal 30%.
Okay, I have a question about the interaction between this new sub 8 and how it interacts with 415. So basically, this is just saying that the Home SF program is entirely divorced from inclusionary. Is that right?
That is correct. Now, at the moment, the income levels track the one proposal that is before us regarding Planning Code Section 415. But subject to your upcoming negotiations, I don't know if that's going to change or not, but Home SF would remain at these levels with an equal distribution among all the three levels.
So here's just the legal question that I'm having trouble with. I mean, insofar as, for instance, we wanted to capture density bonus in inclusionary to build more affordable units, but we're told by council that we couldn't do that. And I keep hearing here again and again, this would be 30% of all units. How are we, legally, how can we do that through the maker to the deputy city attorney?
I'm not sure I understand the question. The subsection 8.
If we can do this in 206.3, why can't we do this in 415.6?
Through the chair, if I may answer that, I believe that we are able to calculate the affordability levels on the totality of the program, the project, including the bonus units, because it is our own local density bonus program. You're not allowed to do that in Section 415 because of state law prohibitions, which I do believe that Assemblymember Ting is seeking to change.
This is an optional program.
So because it's voluntary,
It's a
okay,
voluntary program.
that makes sense. And then on the other two amendments,
But before you go there, just I did see that on page 19 at line 3, the subsection C2 reference should say subsection C1.
I'm sorry, 19C1.
19 line 3.
Mm-hmm.
It says subsection C2. It should say subsection C1.
Well, while we're doing those, just, I mean, when you go through 58 pages and you're cross-referencing, which I was doing last night, on page 56, it refers to section 206.3 sub E, sub 1, sub B. I can't find that. Maybe I just... I mean, there is a notice provision, but it doesn't seem to make sense with that.
Meanwhile, can I point you to another amendment? Or do you want to wait?
Sure, yeah.
Page 56, line 17 through 19. Talks about that sixth finding that the Planning Commission would have to make about whether any existing commercial or retail uses have been designated or is eligible to be designated as a legacy business or is a formula retail business.
So exceptions. This is the exception section.
This is the conditional use finding section that the Planning Commission would have to make.
The additional criteria section.
Correct.
But it, I mean, with all due respect, it doesn't say what the standard is.
We do have a legacy business program here in our city, so we are going off of that program that exists.
Right, but it doesn't say, it just says additional criteria. In addition to the criteria set forth in C2, the Planning Commission shall consider the extent to which the following criteria are met: whether any existing commercial or retail use has been designated or is eligible to be designated. That doesn't say, and therefore they shall say yes or no.
Right, but we are, again, even these 5 previous conditional use findings are unique to Home SF. You could do a code compliant project, you could do a project under state density bonus law. You don't even have to talk about displacement of commercial businesses at all at the Planning Commission. And we are requiring that conversation to come out so that the Planning Commission can actually make that choice as to whether they want a developer to reconsider what they're doing with a commercial tenant. I think that's really important because we've often heard that Small Business Commission would like to be part of the planning conversations, and this is our way of inserting that dialogue into the Planning Commission hearing.
But it doesn't give the commission any guidance as to what the standards are. It's just saying you need to talk about it. It doesn't say, and you have to find that it won't displace them or that they'll be eligible to return, or, I mean, there's no...
We can't say that they can be eligible to return because of state restrictions against commercial rent control, so we've tried to do everything we possibly can to not violate that state law. I'd love to be able to say that we would like that small business to return and at that same rental rate, but I can't do that.
Well, you could say that the guidance is that legacy businesses, that proposal to demolish a legacy business will render it ineligible for Home SF. I mean, you could do that. And that, by the way, one of the speakers spoke to the support of the San Francisco Council of District Merchants, and they sent us a letter today that does not contradict that statement, but it does go on to say that they request a number of amendments, and one of them is no displacement of any legacy business, which I assume means designated legacy business. But this would be the place to actually require a finding by the commission that a legacy business, like the ones that Mr. Warshel talked about, Tommy's Joint, et cetera, are not displaced. So, I mean, we could change this from whether any existing commercial retail use has been, we could change it to any existing commercial or retail use designated or eligible for designation would preclude its demolition.
Through the chair, I do understand the recommendation that was made on that front, and even amongst the small business community, I think that there is disagreement as to whether there should be preferential treatment for legacy businesses or even new businesses that come along and actually do great things for the community and uplift neighborhoods. So because there is that divide even within the small business community, I'm not prepared to take this amendment. We have inserted this new finding at the Planning Commission, so that at least there can be a robust dialogue about it at the Planning Commission. But again, there are many businesses that may be new that actually contribute a great amount to the community.
And with regard to the formula retail provision in this new sub F, it says or is a formula retail business. It doesn't say what that means, but again, in the Council of District Merchants, this is the San Francisco Council of District Merchants Association, representing a long list ranging from the Golden Gate Restaurant Association to the Chinatown Merchants, Bayview Merchants, Castro Merchants, Clement, Dogpatch, Fillmore, Fisherman's Wharf, Glen Park, Golden Gate, Greater Geary, Hayes Valley, Japantown, on it goes. They request that no new formula retail in new buildings that replace buildings that were demolished, which were previously not occupied by formula retail. Any thoughts on that request by the Council of District Merchants from the author?
Through the chair, we have a provision here that we actually inserted a long time ago that requires the replacement of the like square footage of the previous ground floor use. So that was put in there designed to prevent a formula retail from occupying a space that was previously occupied by a smaller business occupying a smaller square footage.
I read that. I don't know if it does that.
That was our way of trying to address the issue.
If competent counsel makes that representation,
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I think this might be a question for the planning department staff.
All right. Paulo?
Talking about the replacement of the commercial space at like size?
Yeah,
correct?
but what the author seems to believe, and I'm not convinced of it, is that that would also be of a similar use. So formula retail could be replaced with formula retail, but non-formula retail could not be replaced with formula retail, is the way I understood the author's.
Right, I believe it's not about the use, it's the size. So if it's a 2,000 square foot storefront, then the replacement project would include 2,000 square feet.
I believe it does say that.
Right.
I agree with you there.
Yep.
But what I think what the request from the Merchants Council of District Merchants is, and it seems like a sensible policy request, is that a formerly non-formula retail could not be replaced with a formula retail, and I don't think that the legislation does that.
I do not believe that it does.
So I would respectfully request that such an amendment, which it sounds like was what the author thought it did, be added. While I'm flipping through this, by the way, on page 8 at line 23, I think that's a typo in the last line. Just happens to be the page that is in front of me. I'll get to some weighty policy issues here in a while. Do you see that one? See that, Audrey? Yeah. Okay, so should we find the other ones? I guess that takes us to bedroom unit mix amendment is where? Is that on page 14?
Yes, that is correct. Starting on line 12.
So I think it's consistent with the types of actions that not only we've been taking lately at the board, but consistent with the Planning Commission's admonitions as well as some of the public comments as it relates to three-bedroom units. And I think this could be incorporated there rather than using the word in some, which includes some three-bedroom or larger units. I thought the notion that was expressed here and also expressed by the Planning Commission of actually putting a minimum percentage on that at well, Supervisor Kim and my inclusionary legislation actually has 20%. What came out of planning on April 27th was 10% as it related to inclusionary. But I think if we want to kind of conform all of our various policies, this would be the spot to do it, and I would respectfully suggest that policy.
Through the chair, thank you. We did run some numbers on the mix, and we were one of the first programs out the gate to talk about 40% two bedrooms and so forth. I would prefer to keep it this way. We made a very conscious decision based on analysis done that this language we have would yield the most number of two bedroom units.
I'm sorry. Say the last part of that again.
The language that we have in this section would yield the most number of two-bedroom units, and the fact that also, from what we understand, the encouragement of larger than two-bedroom units, actually a lot of times, many of those units are unaffordable to families and tend to be actually occupied by people who are millennial roommates and so forth, when we're trying to serve a particular purpose to serve people with, with families.
So we're not going to build three-bedroom units because...
through the chair, we do have a 50% alternative, which is that it would include some 3-bedroom or larger units. But again, the priority for Home SF is really 2 bedrooms.
All right. And then as to the comments that we had on unit size and the suggestion that we conform the legislation to the standards developed by the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, which the Mayor's Office of Housing uses for affordable housing projects, which is 600 square feet for a 1-bedroom, 850 for a 2-bedroom, and 1,100 for a 3-bedroom. Any thoughts on that?
I would like to actually bring Kate Hartley up from the Mayor's Office of Housing to speak to that.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Kate Hartley. Our current procedures manual calls for the inclusionary units to be built of a size comparable to the principal project's unit, but in no case less than the Tax Credit Allocation Committee's minimum unit size. Please note that in 2016, the TCAC reduced its minimum unit sizes, so we do follow that their guidelines in our affordable housing development.
No, I understand that. I reduced it from the numbers I just gave you, or those
Yes.
are, so those are now what?
450 for 450 for a 1-bedroom, 600 for a 2-bedroom. I'm sorry, 700 for a 2-bedroom, and 900 for a 3-bedroom.
So through the chair to Supervisor Tang, would you be willing to incorporate those in Home SF?
Sorry, I didn't catch the answer. I apologize.
It was the numbers were 450 square feet for a 1-bedroom, 700 minimum for a 2-bedroom.
I guess I would defer to planning because I know we do have some residential design guidelines and so forth. I don't know if that needs to be spelled out or if
we already do what has been suggested as what we should be doing. I just did want to note that the Tax Credit Allocation Committee does change its standards from time to time, and just recently we had a change. But we do follow their minimum guidelines and find that it's...
No, I understand that you have to do that, but I don't see how that applies to Home SF.
Well, for inclusionary units, the MoCD procedures manual sets forth the various rules about, the nitty-gritty details of construction and other things related to inclusionary. So what we say in our inclusionary procedures manual is the unit sizes have to be comparable to what the principal unit sizes are, but in no case less than what the TCAC minimums are.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I just don't, and maybe this is a question for the city attorney, I don't know that that applies to Home SF.
Home SF, the amendments that Supervisor Tang is introducing today, it requires these Home SF units to comply with the Inclusionary Affordable Housing Program, except for the number of units, the percentage of units, and the AMI levels. So everything else in 415.6, these units have to comply with.
Okay, so that would include the unit size.
I believe so, but that's probably better for Kate to answer.
That was, through the chair, that was our understanding.
And Marie Rogers from Planning Staff, and that is also consistent with the feasibility studies that we did on the background. We did assume that the units would be built to this size, so that's consistent with expectations.
Okay, why don't we move on to and colleagues, I have circulated to you a policy analysis that I asked the budget analyst to do that lays out median household income by neighborhood in San Francisco, and I want to thank the budget analyst for preparing that. It was actually quite an interesting document showing the San Francisco median household income at $81,294 as of 2015, and showing that broken out demographically as well as by neighborhood. And I believe we have in the procedures section at page 18 some discussion of specified areas, and I assume that only applies to, on page 11, and correct me if I'm wrong, Supervisor Tang, the north of Market Residential Special Use District. And what I would suggest is that we make that apply to neighborhoods that are below the median household income for the city. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, we had thought about this a lot when I believe you had proposed density done right last year. That is something that I am not comfortable with proposing at this moment. I would like this to operate the same way that our Mayor's Office of Housing portfolio currently operates. So again, it's not a change that I would like to make.
Well, this actually is... This does empower the Mayor's Office of Community Development to reduce the area median income such that these units be marketed at a price that is at least 20% less than the current market value for a unit of that size in that neighborhood.
Okay, I understand that. And, you know, I would even call up Planning Department again, because when you had proposed this concept last year, again, we had looked into this, but it's not something that I want to incorporate into Home SF.
Is there a policy reason for that?
Supervisors, as we discussed this last year and we were looking at the median income by neighborhood list that we had at the time, we looked at some neighborhoods like the Tenderloin and saw that the median income was approximately 35 to 40%, and which is quite far below the median income in other neighborhoods. It would create almost a redlining effect where you were, if you wanted to build denser, you could only build at an extremely low income level. So the proposal to take the developments that come forward with this program on a case-by-case basis and ensure that they're at least 20% below market provides you with more freedom to have greater income mixing in the neighborhoods and not concentrate extremely low income households in the neighborhoods in which they already live if you want to build with greater density. So that was the sort of guiding policy reason.
Well, then let me ask this insofar as Chinatown actually has a median household income that is frankly considerably less than the median household income in the Tenderloin, and I note that in subsection 206.3 B2D, the Tenderloin, in essence here, is taken out, subjected to further study, but Chinatown is not. I guess that's really a policy question. It's not a question to you, Ms. Hartley. It's a question to the maker.
I apologize. Can you ask that one more time?
Why is the Tenderloin not included? Presumably, as it says here, because it is going to have a study that will explore opportunities to support and encourage the provision of housing at the low, moderate, and middle income range, blah, 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 blah. But Chinatown, which is an even lower income community by median household income, $21,000 as compared to almost $26,000. Why does it only include the Tenderloin and not Chinatown?
I believe that at that time, and we can further discuss this absolutely, at that time we had taken out that portion because District 6 had historically just seen so much of development occurring in that neighborhood, and so willing to consider it as part of kind of phase 2 of this Home SF effort.
Respectfully, I don't understand what that means.
So the Tenderloin and the District 6 area in general has seen a lot of development, the vast majority of the development occurring in San Francisco. And so at that time, we felt that we were trying to encourage housing development in other neighborhoods that have not been as developed. And so we were willing to have that Tenderloin area be part of Phase 2 pending the study.
All right, well, let me put this in a little bit of context. And I know, Supervisor Tang, you've heard me speak about this ad nauseum, but it really has to do with the evolution of the city. And I represent the geographically smallest district in the city because it is the densest district in the city and one of the earliest settled parts of the city, and together with Chinatown, but really the rest of the district, it's RH3 or denser, zero lot lines, actually precisely the kind of development that we are seeking not only in San Francisco but around the Bay Area, because the housing crisis is a regional issue and, as a matter of fact, exacerbated by communities to the south and north and east of us. But relative to density equity, let me say, number one, I absolutely agree that there are parts of the city that are significantly less dense. And certainly there are infill and soft sites throughout the city that I think would benefit from density bonus. And let me also acknowledge that I think the fundamental concerns about not repeating the mistakes of redevelopment where we end up with residential displacement, you have gone a great way to ameliorating. And so I want to acknowledge that, because we do not want to end up exacerbating the eviction crisis and what have you. So I absolutely acknowledge that and appreciate it. But I still think the notion that District 6 has gotten a lot of development in recent years is absolutely right. And it is because we, as a planning matter, decided to do Rincon Hill Plan, Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, Western SOMA Plan. That was done very consciously. I think that the intent of subsection D is to also acknowledge that we have communities, and I would say that much of the northeast corner of the city, and Chinatown in particular, are a part of that, quite frankly, are extremely dense and I don't think would benefit from density bonus, with the exception of soft sites. And that gets me to the next question. This is a question really for Ms. Rogers, which is the way I understand this, and there may be a totally different way of coming at it, but is that if you take the density bonus map that was around last year, which looks like all the black on here, which kind of looks like the District 3 density bonus map if you look at it carefully. But then you net out everything that's residential, where you don't want to have displacement, and you net out known historic buildings as required by the law, you end up presumably with soft sites. Ms. Rogers, is that a fair statement?
Pretty close to what I described earlier. The map that we made does net out historic resources and does net out properties that have residential units on them. And then there is one more cut that we did to show where the development is what we call soft. So we did a soft site analysis. So we added in a layer to try to help community members and board members understand which parcels would be more likely to see development. Because if there is a fully built out building on a site that is getting revenue from business or other commercial uses, it's unlikely that development will happen there, as opposed to a lower developed lot, like a parking lot is an example, or a gas station that just has one use on it. So we tried to help people predict where development would be most likely to happen, and that's a tool that we use in all of our community planning efforts, the soft site analysis. So that's another layer on top that doesn't exclude, but shows likely development sites.
Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement about those kind of soft sites. Your parking lots have Adam, your 1-story, your gas stations. I think I mean, you're looking at the guy who helped preside over the Octavia Market Plan, the Rincon Hill Plan, the Eastern Neighborhoods Plan, was the first person to take a crack at early ADU legislation, albeit it was not politically popular at that time. So, and these are all tools in our toolbox. And I think Home SF is another tool in our toolbox. I don't want anybody out there to think that all of a sudden evictions are going to stop and units are going to be affordable and all of the moving stories that I hear and we all hear on a daily basis are going to all of a sudden change. But it's another tool in the toolbox. But I think we should go in it in a smart way. And I guess what I'm suggesting, Supervisor Tang, is that in the densest area of the city, that rather than netting things out by saying residential, historic, that we actually, at least in the case of the northeast corner of the city, limit it to soft sites, and particularly sites where we're going to get a reasonable amount of housing. I mean, I got in trouble with my constituents when I said the old Lombardi should, instead of being another Whole Foods 6 blocks away from an existing Whole Foods, be used for 80 units of housing. And while my constituents disagree with me, I still think that's true. And, we've seen that with the purchase that Mayor Lee and I submitted last Tuesday, buying a soft site in Chinatown, which will be coming before the board, where we can have housing above a restaurant. And we've seen that. This is my bona fides on putting my money where my mouth is on all of the abandoned freeway sites at Broadway Sansom, Broadway Battery, the iHotel site. So I'm looking at the Kirkland Bus Yard site, at Station 13, a fire station that's 28 feet high, zone 200 feet, where we can build over 100 units of housing at various income levels. But I would very respectfully be interested in limiting Home SF to soft sites. I disagree with the folks who are saying 18 and 15,000 square feet, but of 12,500 square feet. And I also don't want to see people start merging fine grain lots in areas like the Polk Street corridor, North Beach, Chinatown, in order to achieve those. So I'm interested in a soft sites, 12,500 square feet, and no lot mergers. But I absolutely believe that in that part of the city, gas station sites, parking lots, bank sites make perfect sense. And according to the information that planning provided me earlier today, would result in some 1,100 units just on those soft sites in District 3. So I just want to put those thoughts in your mind. And then finally, why does the regulatory agreement only last for 55 years? Why is it not in perpetuity? If anybody wants to answer that.
I think I think it would probably be Kate Hartley from Mayor's Office of Housing.
Well, the inclusionary restrictions are a permanent restriction in our inclusionary program. When we do regulatory restrictions for our affordable housing, we use 55 years because we have to bring debt into the projects, and it has to be a bona fide loan, so it has to have a maturation date in order to be a viable piece of financing for tax credit deals. But the inclusionary restrictions are permanently recorded on the housing. And
that would be true even in the bonus density portion of the building?
That's my understanding. Yes, I mean, that's how our inclusionary restrictions
work. So why is there all this language peppered throughout these 58 pages about 55-year duration regulatory agreements?
Audrey Pearson from the City Attorney's Office. The Home SF units have a regulatory agreement that needs to be for the life of the project. That's at page 20, line 15. State density bonus units were limited by the state law to 55 years. So those units can only be regulated for 55 years.
So that's only in the portion of the building that is above the current zoned height. So the additional 2 floors would be 55 years, but the bottom floors would be in perpetuity under 415.6, is that what you're saying?
No, for the home SF project would be a separate project from a state density bonus project. So the state density bonus projects under the other two programs, those units would be subject to a 55-year restriction.
So the analyzed and the state density would be 55 years, but if you voluntarily opted into home SF, it would be in perpetuity.
That's correct.
Thank you for that clarification. And then just a little bit of wordsmithing relative to the provisions that I acknowledged earlier that talk about demolition or conversion, and I'm looking for those words. Appears at several places, but one spot is page 14 at line 16, sub 5. Does not demolish, remove, or convert any residential units. And I thought if we were doing this right, we would say, or portion thereof. And then,
Supervisor, can I just ask why, or the reason behind that?
Just to be abundantly clear that we don't end up in a situation where somebody comes along and says, I'm only doing a portion of a unit.
Is, I guess to the city attorney, is that necessary? Ms. Rogers?
That's a policy call. You could certainly do it. It seems unlikely that somebody would demolish a portion of a residential unit, but then do a bonus project. But if there's a concern that that might happen, it seems to be not a big hit to the program. It seems like it would not be harmful.
But we also do limit the use of the program at page 12, line 12, to it consists of new construction and excluding any project that includes an addition to an existing structure. But it's up to the supervisor.
Then never mind. That takes care of it. And then what about in some circumstances that may exist where there have previously been conversion or demolition, say, last year? How do we deal with that and not give people that incentive or reward them for bad behavior?
Ms. Rogers?
So generally when an applicant comes forward with a new project and a demolition permit, we will not approve the demolition permit separate from the application for the new project. So we are not, as a course of business or under our normal procedures, approving demolition permits. And so any loss of a unit or building would be governed by Section 317 for the loss or merger of existing dwelling units, including even unpermitted units that have not been authorized by the city.
And then did we get an answer on that cross-reference before that I raised?
Yes, I did find that, Supervisor. It should say on page 56, line 21, written notification required by 206.3 E1D as in dog and not B as in boy.
All right, let me try that. If Supervisor Tang and I weren't on the same committee, we could have had this conversation over the weekend, but we're good about not violating the Brown Act. Remind me, Audrey, that's on what page is 206?
That goes to page 18, line 10.
Wait, page 18, line 10?
Yes. That section says documentation that the applicant has provided written notification to all existing commercial or residential tenants that the applicant intends to develop the property pursuant to this section.
Okay. And then, by the way, if you go to those, it's just jumping out at me. Implementation, I think you have the same problem, which is it's mislettered. Do you see that? Because you struck B. On page 17. See B stricken, which should actually make, you see all those?
Yes, that should be. I think that should be double underlined, actually.
What should be double
The
underlined?
B should be double underlined.
Oh, so instead of striking
Instead
it,
of strike through.
insert it. Well, that would fix it. All right, so with that, Supervisor Tang.
Thank you very much for all of your suggestions. And again, as you mentioned, because we cannot commit a Brown Act violation, this is the first time I'm hearing about some of the specific amendments that you'd like to make. If possible, if we can do that today, I'd like to adopt the amendment around the formula retail prohibition on the ground floor. So I don't know if our city attorney were able to do that.
If that is a motion to direct council to prepare that amendment, I'd be fine with that.
Vice Chair Peskin, as a note, we have received a presidential action memo assigning Supervisor Safai in place of Supervisor Farrell. Before a vote is taken, can we have a motion to excuse Supervisor Farrell, beginning at 4:22 p.m.?
I'll make a motion to excuse Supervisor Farrell.
And we'll take that without objection.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, if I can make a motion then to prohibit formula retail from entering into the ground floor in a home SF project.
Sure, we can make that change.
We have a second here.
Yeah, we can take that without objection.
Okay. All right, and then as to your question around limiting projects to soft sites only within, I guess, District 3 or highly dense neighborhoods, if that's something I could take back to planning staff as well and consider for the full board. Again, because this is the first time we're communicating about it directly, so I'd like to do some more analysis around that too.
Okay, so that's not a motion, it's just a...
I will look into it before the full board.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns?
I think they have been raised. I think the ones that I raised relative to the unit mix, I think, is still out there and should be further discussed and deliberated, as well as creating a maximum rent or sale price that is below the average asking rent or sale price for the relevant market area, which you spoke to, is still an outstanding issue, but we can take that up at the full board.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So with that...
Oh, I forgot. I'm the vice chair. Supervisor Safai.
Supervisor Safai.
Thank you.
Sorry, Supervisor Peskin's vice chair.
Okay. Is everyone okay? Can I say that? Okay.
That's why I've got the gavel.
So thank you. Sorry I wasn't here earlier. We've been kind of running in between negotiations. There's larger conversations happening, and there's larger debate about inclusionary housing and Home SF. But I am a co-sponsor on this Home SF program. I think there's been a tremendous amount of thought and analysis done, considerable amount of outreach. I'm very supportive of the amendment today to prohibit formula retail and Home SF projects. I'd like to say that this is truly an urban infill design. I mean, we're really debating a number of different things, and there's a lot of competing interests in San Francisco, but I think overwhelmingly folks are very interested about producing affordable housing in general. And we're going to have to make some tough choices. There's parts of San Francisco, including my district, that has not necessarily done its fair share when it comes to dealing with density and height. And that doesn't mean that we want to be in the business of displacing longtime retail businesses. I think the fact that we are putting a provision in, it's existing, that says no displacement of existing residential tenants, I think that's very strong, and that's something that's unique to Home SF. But at the end of the day, this is also designed to help revitalize parts of the city, again, like the Excelsior Outer Mission, Geneva, that have not had investment, that are wanting for development and smart development. And this is a very aggressive program when it comes to affordable housing, and it will help to build housing for working people. There were people that spoke here today that contradicted themselves. They said they made $70,000 a year, but yet they wouldn't benefit from this program. That is not true. Working people will tremendously benefit from Home SF. Teachers, paraprofessionals, secretaries, janitors, these are the folks that when they apply to our existing affordable housing programs, do not qualify because they're over income. So it is not true to say that working people will not benefit from this. They will tremendously benefit from this. And we will have a broad range of incomes ranging from about $35,000 a year all the way up to $130,000, $140,000 a year household income. So this is a very well thought, laid out program. I'd like to commend Supervisor Tang for all the hard work and leadership she's put in on this. So I am in full support of moving this program forward. That is not to say that we're not open to amendments. We want to hear the conversation continue. We can make amendments at the full board. We're making a strong amendment today to protect against formula retail, and I think we're open to future amendments. The idea, Supervisor Peskin talked about unit mix, the idea that 40% of these units would be 2 bedrooms with the option of having 50% 2 and 3, again, that is very, very aggressive, and I think it's very well thought out, and that will be a very family-friendly component of this program. You make units affordable and create the right bedroom sizes, you will get families in these projects. So that's all I really had to say, but I'm very, very supportive of moving this forward today.
So with that, I don't think we have actually taken the amendments. So I believe, Supervisor Tang, you made a motion to take the amendments that you presented earlier with an amendment of the whole. So we'll take those without objection. We have directed the city attorney to draft and incorporate the formula retail controls that Supervisor Tang has agreed to take. And then I appreciate Supervisor Tang's endeavors between today and a week from tomorrow to incorporate the density equity provisions that I discussed for the northeast corner of the city, the densest part of the city. And with that, can we send this item pending that language to the full board without recommendation until we see what that language looks like?
Sure, and also just one quick note, if we do look into taking portions of some of the northeast portion of the city out of Home SF, just a reminder that the state density bonus law does apply and doesn't have nearly the sort of protections that we offer through Home SF. So I just want to make that very clear.
Yeah, look, the state density law has been on the books since 1979, and they're not knocking down our door, neither in the northeast corner of the city or citywide. I am absolutely cognizant of the legal decisions, but I'm also not if we limit it to soft sites, I believe we have adhered to what we need to adhere to. But if people want to come in and ask, they've been welcome to do that for getting on to 40 years.
All right. Well, again, I think because of the 2013 court case, that has what triggered and sparked new interest in the state density bonus law. And as I mentioned earlier, there are about 8 pending projects in the pipeline that are waiting to use that law, as well as the first project that was approved by the Planning Commission under that law. Our planning commissioners even said themselves, where's our local version of this? And it's been in the works, and here we are.
I totally understand that. And by the way, if you look at those, what looks to me like 7 formal requests, The vast majority of them, guess what, are on gas station sites. So, I mean, and thank you for providing that information, Ms. Rogers. So with that, can we send this to the full board without recommendation as amended, other amendments pending? That will be the order. Madam Clerk, could you please read the next item?
Agenda item number 3 is an ordinance amending the planning code to revise the amount of inclusionary affordable housing fee and the on-site and off-site affordable housing alternatives, requiring a minimum dwelling unit mix and making appropriate findings.
Supervisor Safai.
So just real quick, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. We're going to continue this item. We're actually down the hall in negotiations, and so we're trying to move the conversation forward. So I move to continue this item.
Is there any public comment on item number 3? Seeing none, public comment is closed. We have a motion to continue the item to our meeting of the 15th. Without objection, the item is continued. Mr. Clerk, could you read items 4 and 5 together, please?
Agenda item numbers 4 and 5 are ordinances amending the general plan, planning code, and zoning map to create the 1500 Mission Street Special Use District and revise the height and bulk designations to facilitate the project at 1500 Mission Street and making appropriate findings.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Diego Sanchez with Planning Department staff. I'm also joined by Maya Small of the Planning Department. The items before you include a zoning map, a planning code, and a general plan amendment to enable the project at 1500 Mission. The project at 1500 Mission includes the demolition of 2 buildings and the new construction of 2 buildings. One is a 16-story city office building that will house a one-stop permitting center and other office functions. And the other is a 39-story residential tower containing approximately 550 dwelling units, of which 110 will be, or 20% will be permanently affordable. And this tower will also include 38,000 square feet ground floor retail. Supervisors had mentioned to enable this project before you have 2 ordinances. They would, 1, amend the zoning map to change the height and bulk district applicable to the subject property. Maximum heights and bulks would be reduced on the development site from 320 feet to 240, while increasing maximum heights on the other portions of the site from 250 to 400. There's a planning code amendment which would create the 1500 Mission Street Special Use District. This SUD would include the following changes: allowing additional parking for office user needs and public visitor needs, modifying bulk controls, allowing larger floor plans to accommodate the office use, allowing overhead wind attenuating architectural features, requiring an additional publicly accessible mid-block alley, and allowing wider vehicular openings on the 11th Street facade, which would limit these openings on the South Van Ness and Mission Street facades. The last ordinance is a general plan amendment, which is requested to be amended to provide consistency with the proposed changes to the zoning map. Specifically, Map 3 of the Market Octavia Plan and Map 5 of the Downtown Plan would be amended to show the new height and bulk districts for the subject property. It's important to note that these changes will apply only to the subject property. Adjacent properties will not be subject to the new height, bulk, or use controls. One last piece, supervisors, on March 23rd, the Planning Commission heard the proposed amendments. They voted unanimously to recommend the zoning map, planning code, and general plan amendments before you today. This concludes my presentation, and we are available for questions. Thank you.
Supervisor Tang, any questions for staff? So this is unrelated to what is before us, which is the special use district and the general plan amendment. But, and we are, I think every member of the board is very familiar with this project and 30 Van Ness and all the rest of it, but we still have an issue to resolve that does not need to be resolved today. And I know Supervisor Tang cares about it as much as I do, which has to do with the representations that were made relative to what departments were going to give up lease space. And so at some point before this deal is finally approved, we need to get our hands around that. And so I expect that we will see a cogent and convincing space planning document that makes the representations made to this board and the public and the departments true, or does a darn good job of explaining what has changed. So does that make any sense to you, Supervisor Tang? So with that, is there any public comment? Mr. Pilpel.
Thank you.
Oh, your time is up.
Already? Geez. Thank you very much. And that made perfect sense to me as well, Supervisor, although I think those are capital planning and real estate questions more so than planning department.
That is true.
Okay. I also had one other comment that's not directly related but is on the topic of the 1500 Mission project. I would hope as it continues to develop that they would look carefully at ways to connect the new building to 1 South Van Ness and possibly to put in a further connection between 1 South Van Ness and the Van Ness station. So on cold and wet days, which we hope to have more of, one would be able to get from Van Ness station to both buildings without necessarily seeing the light of day or being subject to inclement weather. But that's another opportunity for the city to work together between those two buildings, whatever functions and departments reside in them. And I'm sure that that can be discussed as this continues to work its way to possible fruition. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Pilpel. Are there any other members of the public on items 4 or 5? Seeing none, is there a motion to send these two items with recommendation to the full board tomorrow as a committee report?
So moved.
Without objection, that will be our decision, and we are adjourned.